Good evening and welcome to our regular council meeting of June 23rd. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Be it resolved that June 23rd, 2025 council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 6:37 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. If you could please rise for the singing of our national anthem. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move to approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda as amended. Or are there any corrections or errors? Sorry, I should have asked that first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are no amendments to the agenda this evening.
So as circulated, all those in favor? Carried. Approval of minutes. Were there any errors or omissions noted? Seeing none. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the minutes of the following meeting be adopted as circulated. Previous meeting minutes, June 9th, 2025. All those in favor? Carried. So we'll start with the public meeting. Zoning bylaw 0525 Laporte. Is everything okay? Okay. So zoning bylaw 0525 Laporte. Just a reminder to everybody this evening for the public meeting. There are two on the agenda. No decision is made this evening. If you wish to speak up about a matter, your name and civic address when approaching the podium. To use the podium, you press the gray button, red lights will come on, speak into the microphone, and that makes it easier for people in the room as well as online afterwards. These will be up online in the morning, 9 o'clock typically, so you can watch back tomorrow. And then one thing that I didn't do last time that I learned from would be we do have a sense of decorum as we speak. We can talk about issues and ideas. We can have difference of opinions. We're not here to attack any individual for whatever matter. And if that is the case, I will, I guess, hit the gavel and bring us back. And we can always go back to the issues at heart, because I think I let one go about 6 months ago, and I should not have, so I regret to do that again. So zoning bylaw 0525, Laporte. Ms. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joanne Haley, and beside me is Mr. Claude Laporte. So we're going to start off with this public meeting first. But before we get started into two public meetings, I do have to read some required wording under the Ontario Planning Act. So this is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Ontario Planning Act. Any person may attend the public meeting and or make written or verbal representation, either in support of or in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Township of South Glengarry before the bylaw is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, also known as the OLT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at this public meeting or make written submissions to the council before the bylaw is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT unless there are reasonable grounds to do so. So as I mentioned, our first public meeting this evening is known as the Laporte zoning bylaw amendment. This meeting will begin with a presentation summarizing the application, followed by a discussion period during which all attendees will have an opportunity to provide input on the proposed bylaw. This property is located at part of Lot 17, Concession 1, being Part 2 on Reference Plan 14R 6437, in the geographic township of Lancaster, now in South Glengarry, and is located on Fernwood Drive. We have a map of the parcel of property that we're dealing with this evening. To help everyone to put this into perspective, this subdivision right here is known as Redwood Estates. This would be the South Service Road. The red lines would represent the 401, and you'll see then that Fernwood Drive is accessed off of Third Line Road, which is south of South Service Road, and the property is to the west. The purpose of this zoning amendment is to rezone the subject property from provincially significant wetland and floodplain holding to provincially significant wetland and residential 1, exception 23, to permit site alteration and a single detached dwelling to be developed within 15 meters of the provincially significant wetland boundary to the south, 10 meters to the north, 5 meters to the east, and 3.3 meters to the west, and to reduce the watercourse setback, which has fish habitat, from 30 meters to 15 meters. If this amendment is approved, all other provisions of our zoning bylaw 3809, as amended, will continue to apply. The applicant is proposing to develop the property to accommodate a single detached dwelling. There's been a lot of work that has gone into this property for several years, really. So prior to the zoning amendment application being filed, the applicant worked with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority and obtained what's called a fill permit under the Conservation Authorities Act. A portion of the subject property was filled and raised above the floodplain. This process was required to be completed prior to filing a complete zoning amendment application. This is a sketch or concept plan that basically shows how the property is intended to be developed. I'm going to walk you through this. This is where the proposed driveway would be along the western property line. The area in pink is the outline of the proposed dwelling, and then this area would be the outline for the proposed septic system, with this area being for parking. And this area represents the property line or the waterfront. There's been a lot of erosion on that side, and so that property line has changed over the years. We have another image that's basically outlines the same concept plan, but just looks a little differently. And in here, you can see where the numbers are allocated, and I realize this is very difficult to see on this screen, but it shows then the setbacks that I listed out. This diagram was prepared by a consulting firm that is an environmental firm. I now have a series of images of the existing property. So part of our public consultation process, we have to notify the abutting property owners within 120 meters, but we also place the sign on the subject property. And so you see here the sign has been erected at the end of the property. This is where the access to the property is. You'll see some gravel here. This represents what work was completed after the Raisin Region Conservation Authority issued this fill permit, and this establishes the building envelope for the development. And then this is a better view of basically where that building envelope is going to be. And then this represents what's on the shoreline. So the parcel of property is identified down here. You'll see that this is currently zoned floodplain holding in our bylaw, and as we mentioned, there's another layer of provincially significant wetland underneath it, so it has basically dual zoning in that location. Prior to that cut and fill permit being issued, and prior to the township being able to deem the zoning amendment application complete, Mr. Laporte had to retain environmental consulting firm to complete an environmental impact study. The impact study looks at basically flora and fauna elevations of the subject property. So the findings of the EIS, that stands for the Environmental Impact Study, suggest the proposed project is likely to comply with the official plan and the provincial planning statement. It will meet the requirements of the township. However, opportunities exist within the EIS to provide further information pertaining to the proposed development and to provide additional mitigation measures to limit or otherwise mitigate against environmental impacts to the natural features and their ecological functions. So for example, when we receive a study, oftentimes there's recommendations that are made. They can support the development, but they'll make recommendations such as certain plantings shall be placed on the subject property. In this particular case, they're proposing a berm. Proposing areas that aren't to be developed. And so that's something that we have to be very cognizant of when we're doing this review. If the zoning amendment application is to be approved by council, the applicant will be required to enter into a development agreement to agree and to implement those recommended mitigation measures included in the EIS. That environmental impact study is also peer-reviewed. So we do not have biologists on staff at the township. So what happens is we retain a qualified environmental consulting firm that reviews the study that Mr. Laporte had paid for. That's done to guarantee that it was done well. If there's any issues that were brought up in the report, or if there was any disagreements, the consultants would work together to make sure that they're on the same page. In this particular case, there ended up being 2 amendments to the environmental impact study to address some of the comments that were received. And Mr. Laporte has agreed to enter into that agreement if the amendment is to be approved. The application was circulated to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, and they provided the following comments. The RCA does not currently object to the zoning bylaw amendment as presented. The RCA would like to remind the applicant that Conservation Authority Act permits from the RCA must be obtained prior to any further development within the previously noted regulated area. No written comments have been received to date from the members of the public. This zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council in the future, and we will be bringing a staff report with a recommendation to council for a decision. As I mentioned, Mr. Mayor, we have Mr. Laporte beside me, and he's here to answer any particular questions regarding his proposed development that I can't speak to, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council or the public may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Laporte, do you have anything you wish to add at present?
No, not at the present time.
Are there any questions from around council table? Seeing none, are there any members of public to speak about this application? Okay, well, I guess that sums up the public consultation consultation at this point for this particular zoning bylaw. Okay, so at this point then, we've been heard. You'll come back with a report at a future date. Do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we will take the time that's needed to prepare the report for a future council agenda, and if any comments come in the meantime, they'll be incorporated into the report. So thank you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Laporte. All right, we'll move on to zoning bylaw 0625 Impala Development Incorporated. Just one note before you're leaving, the floors apparently are getting slippery due to condensation, so please be mindful on your way out of the building. I just don't want anybody to slip and fall. Additionally, I think I heard a phone go off, and so just a reminder, I just turned mine off earlier, so turn your phone off. There's a lot of people here. Okay, so zoning bylaw 0625 Impala Developments Incorporated, Ms. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I mentioned for the previous application, this meeting will begin with a presentation summarizing the application, followed by a discussion period during which all attendees have an opportunity to provide input on the proposed bylaw if they wish. So this parcel of property is located on Lot 27, Registered Plan 15, in the geographic township of Lancaster, now in South Glengarry, and is located at 20378 Old Montreal Road. This is a map of the property. You'll see it's highlighted in black, and I'll help orient everyone if they're not familiar with this. So this would be County Road 2. If we came around the bend, we'd be heading west towards Somerstown, and then this is Old Montreal Road, and you would head east, and the subject property is on the southeast corner of Old Montreal Road and King Street. The purpose of this amendment is to rezone the subject property from residential 2 to residential 4, exception 6, to permit an 8-unit apartment building to be developed, and to recognize the existing 27.7 meters of lot frontage, to reduce the rear yard setback from 8 meters to 6 meters, to increase the maximum building height from 11 meters to 12 meters, to reduce the landscape buffer width from 3 meters to 0.64 meters on the east interior side lot line, and to reduce the municipal road setback from 10 meters from the center line of the road to 0 meters, to permit a balcony to project 2.05 meters in the exterior side yard setback, to reduce the required 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 1 space per dwelling unit, and to eliminate designated parking. If this amendment were to be approved, all other applicable provisions of our zoning bylaw 3809 as amended will continue to apply. We have some photos taken of the subject property. As I mentioned earlier, every time we receive a zoning bylaw amendment application, we have to notify the public within 120 meters of the subject property. We put an advertisement in a local newspaper, and we also put a sign on the subject property, and we also place it on our website. So this is a few photos of the subject property. You can see it's quite overgrown. This is from Old Montreal Roadside. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. Jacob is here representing the applicants. He is a planner working with the firm Foten and was retained on behalf of the applicants to file this zoning amendment application. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Is the volume all right? Wonderful. Let me know if I'm speaking too quickly, or if for any reason I'm not speaking directly into the microphone. I tend to gesture and try to point to things, and that might move me away from it. So I appreciate it. It's also very warm. But I'll jump right into the presentation. If I could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Joanne already walked you through the location of the subject property on Old Montreal Road. The western property line abuts King Street. It has a lot size of approximately 1,055 square meters, and the frontage, which is typically the shortest lot line abutting a street, is at 27.76 meters, just short of 100 feet, along Old Montreal Road to the north. This is what we call the site plan for the development. You'll note that we're asking for a 3.5-story residential apartment building. The building footprint itself is about 205 square meters, which equals about 2,200 square feet. We're proposing one parking lot with 8 total spaces, which represents a 1-to-1 parking ratio, 1 space per unit. The setbacks are generally in the realm of 6 meters. This is notable on the south side because that is a setback reduction from the typical 8 down to 6. And I have a few slides more in detail on that in a bit. I would also note on this slide that our lot coverage is around 19%, which the maximum is actually 40%. So we have a total of 8 units. This is an example of the ground floor. It's 5 1-bedroom units and 3 2-bedroom units. To provide some more detail on the size of those units, the 1-bedroom units are about 650 square feet. The 2-bedroom units are about 850 square feet. And they also all may have exterior balconies. This is an elevation showing the exterior of the building. You can see the front of the building where you see the main door and the balconies. That's actually the facade that faces onto King Street. There's some images in a minute that will show you. And then on the, I guess the right side of this slide, that would be the perspective from Old Montreal Road. Next slide, please. Similarly, the other 2 sides of the building. Next slide, please. And to put it into perspective, this is a view from Old Montreal Road looking at the building. So we're facing generally south right now. You can see that the parking lot is located at the front of the building, and the building is typically at the back of the lot. Next slide, please. This is the other perspective. This is taken roughly from the corner of Old Montreal Road and King, looking kind of down King, if you can picture it. And so that's the main doors of the building, and you can note the parking lot on the left, once again, accessible from Old Montreal. And just more of a zoom out so you can see exactly how the parking and the building are located on the lot compared to the existing context. So to touch briefly on the official plan, the subject property is located within what we call an urban settlement area under the county official plan. Settlement areas are identified in the provincial policy statement. So for those in the room who don't typically follow planning matters, there's sort of one document at the provincial level called the provincial policy statement. now called the Provincial Planning Statement. My apologies, they changed it in October. For years, it was PPS. It's still PPS, but it's a different PPS. So the PPS provides guidance to municipalities on what their official plan and their zoning bylaw and any other municipal planning documents should contain from a policy and regulatory directive. So in this case, it's identified as a settlement area. Settlement areas are important in the PPS because that's where we've been directed to concentrate growth. And so it's to note that this, under the PPS, is designated as a settlement area on full municipal services, and the PPS would direct growth to these areas. That includes major cities, smaller cities, towns, hamlets, anything in the PPS that's identified as a settlement area has been targeted through the PPS for intensification and growth in these areas because you're already on water and sewer, essentially. Next slide, please. Speaking briefly to the OP, as I noted, it's in an urban settlement area, but it's also important to note that it's within a residential district. Next slide, please. Going to the zoning bylaw, it's currently zoned R2. Most municipalities use similar zoning codes. R1 typically means a single detached house. R2 typically means you can do a single or you can do a semi or a duplex. Often R3 means a townhouse, R4 means apartments. It's pretty consistent, but not always the same. In this case, it is. We are zoned R2, which permits, as the slide shows, single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, duplexes, linked dwellings, converted dwellings. Those are a little rarer than most, but also boarding houses up to a total of 5 units. And so the proposed zone that we're going for exists in the bylaw. We're not looking to create a new zone. It's the R4 zone. We're seeking an exception. And the purpose of the exception is that when you're coming in for a zoning bylaw amendment, you might not meet necessarily every single provision in the bylaw, and anything that you're looking for an exception from or a variance from gets noted in the bylaw, in this case, R4-, I believe it's 6, and then you would have a list of what you've requested should it be granted. So I'll walk right now, this is a boring slide, frankly. But if we go through them, I added some visuals to help explain what the variances that we're requesting are for. We did get a lot of public feedback through the process so far, so I'd like to thank everybody for submitting your comments in writing ahead of time. That helps us get ready and help address some of your questions, because there's definitely a lot of questions that we received about parking or about building height, and some of those I can help address some of the confusion of right off the bat, which might be helpful. And then if you still have questions, again, please feel free to come up to the podium and ask your questions and provide your comments. So I believe the next slide is a visual, but it's a little too, can we go back, Joanne, if you don't mind? I just want to make sure I'm following because it's a little too small for even me to see over there. Appreciate your patience. Oh, just the one where I had with the table. Yeah, perfect. So on this slide, we're showing that the lot frontage is being reduced. That's one that we threw in there just I don't want to say just because, but the reason is that it's already a deficient lot frontage. So typically when you're in the R4 zone, if you were building a brand new subdivision, for example, and you wanted to put an apartment building, the town would be asking you for a 30-meter frontage. In this case, the lot is only 27.76, so it's already deficient. So we're not looking to reduce it other than permit the existing frontage as it would be in the R4 zone. So it's a reduction from 30 to 27.76 to consider an apartment building. The next variance, and those are the ones listed in blue, is the rear yard depth. And so the rear yard depth is your setback, as we call it. A setback is the distance between the building wall and the closest property line. And so you have your front setback, your 2 sides, and then you have your rear. Most of the rear yard setbacks in the zoning bylaw are for 6 meters. It's pretty typical to see 6 to 7.5 in municipalities. In this case, in the R4 zone, it's 8. When we came up with the site plan, we looked at it and said, is there a reason why this needs to stay at the 8 meters there and provide that much of a buffer on that side, or would 6 meters suffice? Part of the thinking there is that it's a corner lot, and typically when you're building on a corner lot, you don't necessarily have a rear yard, you kind of have 2 side yards. You're abutting your neighbor to the east and you're abutting your neighbor to the south. And depending on how you orient your building, depending on your building design, you're effectively left with 2 side yards. And so if a side yard can be as little as 3 to 6 meters, there's no reason why the rear yard on that side couldn't also be reduced to a total of 6. It's still about 20 feet, it's a sizable setback, and that would generally be maintained as green space. It's on my next slide. maybe we'll jump to that now. So, apologies, we'll go back. Sorry? Do you mind?
I thought you said green space, sorry.
Nope, that's it. Nope. It's okay, I'm not driving, I apologize, everybody, but thank you, Joanne. So the arrow, the blue arrow that I put at the bottom there on the left-hand slide, that is the rear yard setback that we're proposing to reduce. So that's the rear yard as it would be on King Street, roughly. And again, the reduction from that is from 8 meters to 6 meters. The blue arrow at the top, which runs along Old Montreal Road, that's the frontage, or the lot width, we call it sometimes, and that's being reduced from 30 to 27.76. The one on the right is one that we got a lot of questions about. It's building height. So what's permitted under the zoning bylaw is 11 meters. 11 meters is pretty typical across Ontario, I'd say, for a general building height in most zoning bylaws. Some places will go 10 and a half, some will go up to 12, but 11 is pretty consistent. The reason this is important, if we go to the next slide, is building height differs depending on what kind of building you're proposing. And what I mean by that is the shape of your roof. So there's different roof shapes. You can have a flat roof building, as we call it. You've probably seen a bunch of them. They're standard apartment buildings where it's just a flat roof on top. Stormwater is collected and managed in a different way, but it's not peaked. It doesn't go to eaves. This is a peaked roof. The reason that's important is if you do a flat roof, you're allowed 11 meters right to the top, right to where essentially the roof is. When you're doing a peaked roof, because it's not quite the same building design, you measure to the halfway point of the peak. So in this case, we're proposing a peaked roof because there's not a lot of flat roof buildings in this area. And so we do tend to look at the neighborhood character and inspire the...
Please do proceed.
Thank you. So when you're looking at the neighborhood character, you're looking at inspiration from buildings that are around you in terms of what's already there. That has to do with massing, that has to do with materiality, color, design, all types of elements when putting together a building design. So if we were to do a flat roof at 11 meters, that's what the blue box on the left side is trying to show, and it's kind of present on the right image as well. That would be permitted as of right. The zoning bylaw would not need to change in order to permit that blue box. It's not that different from what we're proposing. And what's important to note here too is that if you have a building like ours where we're actually proposing an elevator core is not required for a building of this height. 3.5 stories does not require an elevator. If you do provide an elevator, typically you have what's called an elevator overrun or a mechanical penthouse. And a mechanical penthouse or an elevator overrun is located above the height limit. So when you're applying a maximum building height of 11 meters, you do have some wiggle room above that to put your elevator overrun. That's the second blue box that you can see on the left image where it says elevator. So you have your flat roof, which represents sort of the two little blue corners that you can see, plus your elevator overrun. It's not that different to what we're proposing. It's just that in our case, we've gone with a peaked roof because the houses in the neighborhood have a peaked roof. And rather than have a box project above the box that would be permitted, we decided to hide it within the building design. And so that's the purpose of the peaked roof. Now, where we're going from 11 to, I believe, 11.6, we're asking for 12, is because it allows the peaked roof design to function better, to get the elevator overrun in there, but it doesn't account for an elevator overrun because it's a peaked roof. And typically you wouldn't have that. So in a way, the design is very clever in that it's hiding an element that would normally be permitted. And that's to show that what we are proposing is not that far outside of what's already permitted in your zoning bylaw for an apartment building if this was in the R4 zone. Next slide, please. This one's a bit of a thought experiment, but I appreciate you staying with me. The R2 zone allows for semi-detached, and it allows for 11 meters, which means it allows for roughly a 3-story building. The two examples that I'm showing here are taken from a Canadian context, one with garages, one without, and it shows what a semi-detached 3-story or 2.5-story building could look like. These would be permitted on site today under the R2 zoning. The orange line that I've drawn on the left side imagines if the site was severed, which it could be severed today, to permit 2 semi-detached buildings. You have to vary the lot area very slightly. Essentially, you would require a lot area of 1,080 square meters, which is 4 times 270. We have 1,055. We're not that far off here from being able to develop 2 different semi-detached buildings as of right. Each of those semi-detached buildings could be 11 meters tall, could be flat roof, could be peaked roof, but it's also important to note that those units could have accessory dwelling units, or additional dwelling units as we call them now, which are permitted under the Planning Act for lots on full municipal services in a settlement area, which I previously talked about. That's important because we're not that far off here on this site, as of right, as I said, about 25 square meters, if I'm not mistaken, from being able to build 4 semis at 3 stories, each containing 3 units. That's 12 units. So the density here is almost permitted. We're not asking for that much more than what you can already do under your existing R2 zone. It's just that in this case, we want to do it as an apartment building with an elevator core, because the target audience in this case is older folks. And it's important when you're developing a 3.5, which would typically be a walk-up, to provide for larger corridors, larger doorways, and an elevator, because you're anticipating downsizing in this community and other rural communities across Ontario. So if somebody's living in South Glengarry, or I don't know, anywhere around, and they decide that they want to stay in their community, they live down the street from their friends, they don't want to cut the grass anymore, they don't want to shovel the driveway. There's not a lot of rental options available in this area, so this development looks to provide a new option. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden everybody has to move out of their homes, everybody has to move. It just means that if somebody wants that option, we have to make it available to them. And that's what the PPS asks for. The PPS specifically directs municipalities in their urban settlement areas on full municipal services to consider new dwelling typologies, whether it's 4 semis or an apartment building like this, to provide greater options for people. It comes back to the concept of filtering. If you have somebody in a home that they're not necessarily looking to be in for much longer, or they want to change a pace, or there's an incident and something happens, they can't maintain their property, but they have nowhere to go, they have no rental housing, they have no other options, they're stuck. And that's a house that isn't freed up for somebody else who might be looking to purchase their first home. And you reach a bottleneck at a certain point. So it's not to make a larger comment on the housing market, that's very complicated and would be a different meeting. It's to say that what we're proposing here tonight is options for people in the community, and the options are not that different from what you could do as of right. It's just that semis don't have semis like this would not have an elevator core. I guess you could, I don't see why, but we do. And that's an important option in your community. Next slide, please. So the next one that's highlighted there is about your landscape buffer. I think the next slide shows it a little better. It's more visual. We'll go 2 forward. Thanks. So this is the site plan that I showed previously. What we did though is we went and added green to all the areas that are going to be landscaped. We have a 19% lot coverage, whereas the maximum is 40%, which means that other than the parking lot, everything else is basically staying green. The important thing to note here is that typically a buffer of 3 meters would be provided between a parking lot and a property line. We have a lot of green space adjacent to that east property line, as you can see on the plan here. It's just that we have a pinch point. And where the zoning bylaw measures is 3 meters, it doesn't matter. You have to measure it from your narrowest point. So the intent of the landscape provision is maintained, that there's still a decent amount of green space between both the building and the property next door and the parking lot and the property next door. But your measurement is taken from your narrowest point, your pinch point. And in this case, it's about 2 feet. So that's the intent behind the reduced landscape buffer. It's not necessarily to eliminate green space on site. It's not to reduce the amount of green space that would be adjacent to that property to the east. There is an impact because it is a reduction to 2 feet, but it is, like I said, a pinch point, not a consistent line right across the east property line. Next slide, please. So for this one, there's 2 variances that I want to highlight, and maybe the next slide is better for showing them. One is the reduction of the special setback along King. This is important because it's, maybe Joanne can explain this better when we get there. We're not entirely sure if it's necessary, but the setback reads, and I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of concern over a setback reading 0 meters. We have to work with the wording in the bylaw when we're amending it. We don't get to come in and pitch our own plain language. But what it means is that essentially you have your front yard setback and you have your exterior side yard setback. In this case, it's 6 meters. But what the bylaw says is that in addition to that, where you have a road that I believe is about 20 meters, 18, 20 meters, maybe, again, Joanne can get to that in the second part of the third part of the presentation, you have to provide your front yard setback. And if for any reason your front yard setback would result in a situation where you are 10 meters or less, your building wall is 10 meters or less from the center line of the road, then that's the setback that would apply instead. So it's kind of a belt and suspenders approach where typically you have a 6-meter setback, but if by chance you would be less than 10 meters away from the center line of the road, even with that 6, then the second setback would apply. It's confusing, I do apologize, but in this case, because we're coming in with a zoning bylaw amendment, we go through the laundry list of provisions, and we want to make sure that we capture anything and everything that could be a point of discussion or that could result in a variance, and so we were cautiously including that as part of the application. So I've kind of illustrated here the 4 meters plus 6. We're maintaining the 6 meters. The question is, are we 4 meters from the center line of King? King is a fairly narrow road, and it's not very well traveled. It's kind of hard to tell where the center line is. Using the using Ag Maps, which is the province's GIS software, I did go in and measure it. It does appear to be greater than 4 meters, but I don't have it measured, so I can't confirm. But the request here appears to comply. We included it in the list just in case. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, back one slide. There was another arrow on there that I wanted to point out. The second one is just about the depth of the balconies. So there's a smaller, fatter arrow right there. The balconies project further into that side yard than would typically be permitted. It makes for a much nicer balcony, a much nicer living space, and it's not much closer to the road that it would cause an issue. So it provides good amenity space for residents. Next slide, please. This is where we get to the questions about parking. So what's been provided is 1 space per unit. We've received a lot of comments about this. There's been a lot of concerns that there's no public transit in this area and that 1 space per unit may be insufficient. I maintain that 1 space per unit is appropriate for residential dwelling units. It is appropriate, especially when you factor in a building like this where we are expecting people to downsize. And that 1 space, 1 vehicle per unit is pretty typical in the urban area. This is an urban settlement area, despite the fact that it is more in a village or hamlet context, but we maintain that 1 space per unit could be appropriate. That being said, there was a comment about visitor parking. Somebody noticed that there's no visitor parking that's being provided. We've gone through the feedback received. I think we got 26 pages of comments, and that was one of the biggest ones. So what I'd like to do now is go to 2 slides from now. Because we're proposing 2 visitor parking spaces on this version of the plan. This plan has not been submitted officially, just to be very clear. This was developed in the last few days based on feedback received. So we're sort of just floating it here for council comments. The reason this is important is that we did pass it through staff, and it was identified that there is a policy or a regulation, I'm not too sure where it comes from, that would essentially look down upon or prohibit having 2 separate vehicular accesses on site. So the north one to the parking lot for 8 resident parking spaces, and then on King Street to the south, 2 visitor parking spaces. This has been proposed in order to provide those visitor parking spaces that we're lacking. But as I said, when we brought this up with staff, it was identified that there's currently a policy that would not permit this. That being said, it's my understanding that council has varied this before in order to permit for 2 vehicular accesses on one site, whether that is the total width of the accesses or the number from 1 to 2. So we would be asking council to consider, in order to help respond to some of the public feedback, if they would consider support for 2 visitor parking spaces located just off King Street. You drive straight into them. There's no drive aisle. There's no parking area to maintain. That's what we're pitching. The other public comments that we received, and they were quite numerous, but to summarize them, there's a lot of concerns about, well, street parking, which again, the streets are very narrow in this area. So that's why we're pitching 2 visitor parking spaces. That would be 20% of our parking. Visitor parking is typically 15%. So we're not far off from what would be required. 2 visitor parking spaces for a building like this. When it comes to other site plan management questions, and that's important because site plan control no longer applies to buildings with 10 units or less. So we get a lot of those questions that would typically get pushed to the next stage of development. In this case, waste collection and snow removal. So it's very important to note that the parking lot as arranged, the developer has been notified that snow will have to be removed from the site. So a truck would have to come in and truck it out. There's not enough room typically to put it, you can put a little bit on some of those landscape buffers, which is pretty typical of clearing a parking lot. But in the event of a major snowstorm, it would have to be removed from site to allow the regular functioning. It's also important to note that the snow can't go in the right of way. So the snow on this site will not get pushed into the right of way to narrow the roads. The city's got enough to deal with. Waste collection would also be private in certain cases. So the developer would have to arrange to have waste removed from the site, waste and recycling. So that's, like I said, this is a concept. It's not the plan that's been submitted, but we did want to float it tonight because we have received a lot of public feedback, and we're happy to address questions on the application before you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Excuse me,
I
Mr.
believe
Mayor,
there's a
I'm not
third part.
finished
You
as
said
of
third
yet,
part,
yes.
right? So this is the third part?
Yes,
Ms.
thank you.
Haley?
So we just have a few more slides to go. Thank you for that. So to date, and this was at about 3:45 this afternoon, we had received 56 written comments. As Jacob has mentioned, we've got a lot of feedback from the public, and thank you for submitting your comments. We've received them in various ways. Either they have been sent to me directly, there has been paper copies dropped off at our municipal office through our clerk, and there's been comments sent to members of council, and they have forwarded those comments to us. In many cases, those comments have been duplicated because they've gone to many individuals, so 56 represent individual comments. And the common themes raised by the public are around accessibility of the building, the character of the development, not an appropriate lot for this type of development, concerns with emergency services, construction impacts to the community, parking capacity, site-specific issues such as garbage storage and pickup, snow storage, water, wastewater, and traffic capacity, archaeological study, and historic significance of the area. So you probably heard me say this in the first public meeting, but every zoning amendment application is subject to a decision of council. We bring a staff report back to council for a decision in the near future. There's a few things that I'd like to discuss before we open it up to the public. And so if Mayor and Council will allow me to address some of the reoccurring topics that have come up in the public comments, and hopefully this will help the public understand. Lots of people have asked me directly or indirectly, why did the township accept this zoning amendment application? The Ontario Planning Act is written to allow for amendments to be applied for. Anytime an individual wishes to apply for a zoning amendment, I have to receive that application. Whether we agree or disagree with the application, I have to receive it. In order for me to circulate the application and deem it complete, we do have to make sure that the application has all of the required information to deem it complete. In this particular case, we received an application that had all the information that we needed to be able to move forward. That then allows us to prepare what's called a notice of public meeting. That notice of public meeting, as I mentioned previously, is placed in a local newspaper. It is mailed to individuals 120 meters around the subject property. And as I said, we placed a sign on the property and put the notice on our website. Many people also asked me, why did we only notify people 120 meters? Why didn't we notify more? We can't decide based on each application on when and who we can notify. We have to stick to the legislation. I can't, on some applications, decide to do a notification at a 500-meter radius as opposed to a 120-meter because we have to treat each application equally. The public has done a very good job in sharing this notice, and so as you can see this evening, we have a lot of people here, so we know that the notice often gets beyond the 120 meters because you can drive by and read the sign, you can follow what's on our website, read the newspaper, etc. Another question that's been asked a couple of times was, why was the previous dwelling allowed to be demolished? Doing some research on this, we understand that it was as an old inn or a tap room that was later converted to a single dwelling. This dwelling or this structure and property was never designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. Therefore, it was not protected. Everyone had the right to apply for building permits to modify the structure, or in this particular case, it eventually came down, and a demolition permit was issued in 2018. So to be very clear, this was not a designated structure under the Ontario Heritage Act. Other comments that we received is in regards to a sidewalk on King Street. Our General Manager of Infrastructure Services had done some research to kind of find out the history of this old sidewalk, and you can kind of see remnants of it beneath the grass today. So based on the information that was found was that there was a sidewalk that was on the side of King Street that supposedly served old inns and hotels in the past. This is not an asset that South Glengarry has maintained and is assumed to have been abandoned by the Legacy Township, by the Township of Lancaster. It wasn't something that was continued to be maintained. And for all of you that live in South Lancaster would know much more about that if you've lived there for a long time. In Jacob's presentation, he gave an example of the setback from the center line of the road. So I want to explain this a little bit further to help the public understand. When we wrote the bylaw in 2009, there was various members of staff that were involved in making sure different provisions, zoning standards were placed in the bylaw to work for everyone. We have this section that deals with roads, both with county roads as well as municipal roads. And our road superintendents were actually involved in authoring this policy at the time. The intent works for a road allowance that is 20 meters or 66 feet, which is a typical municipal road allowance. Looking back, this section of the bylaw should have been amended to exclude all of our hamlets and villages such as South Lancaster, Williamstown, Martintown, Baynesville, because none of them have 66 feet or 20-meter road allowances. So I'm going to show you a couple of images. This is an example of where that 10-meter municipal road setback works. This is the corner of Tyatown and Purcell Road. This is a 66-foot road allowance. You can see it's easy to achieve a 10-meter setback before your front yard setback works. And then this is an example of the subject property in South Lancaster. So if you look at Old Montreal Road, it's an approximate measurement of 6.6 meters, and then on King Street's an approximate measurement of 4.6 meters. You'll see a note on the bottom of the slide that says not a surveyed measurement. These streets are not surveyed. These right-of-ways are not surveyed. Knowing the true center line of the road from a survey perspective would have to have an up-to-date survey. When a planning firm is filing a zoning amendment application, they can't assume the numbers. We didn't require those streets to be surveyed. This is why they asked for a setback to 0, even though the setback is probably closer to 6.6 on Old Montreal Road and closer to 4.6 on King Street. Also, as I mentioned, we received a lot of comments to date. So all comments that have received have been filed in the public planning file. I believe I've responded to everyone to say they've been placed in the file. If I've missed some, I apologize. We have received a lot of emails over the last 2 weeks. And these comments will be provided to council in advance of council making a decision. Some of the comments include personal information, so we do not put all the comments on the public agenda, but just so the public knows, we absolutely provide them to council. After the public meeting this evening, if there's anything new that you heard or any comments that you wish to change, you're welcome to continue providing your comments. If your comments don't change, I just want everyone to know that we have received them, so be sure that they are in the file and you won't need to send them in again. So at this time, Mr. Mayor, we would like to open this up to the public. We will do our best to answer any questions that the public have. There may be questions that we cannot answer this evening. There may be times where we have to say to the public that we have to get back to them, or we can follow up during business hours. So again, we'll do our best we can, and hopefully this presentation has provided some additional information and context for the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you. And I did fail to mention that Councillor Jaworski is only not here because I believe one of her children is graduating from Williamstown Public. So she doesn't miss many, but she missed an exciting one, perhaps. Are there comments from the table? Councillor Bougie.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Ms. Haley and Jacob, for your presentation. Thank you for all of the residents that came out on this hot evening to join us this evening for this very important topic. And we did receive many comments and emails, and I've read them all. We take this very seriously. Thank you, Jacob, for going through what zoned R2 and R4 would mean or could potentially mean for this type of development or this area. I do appreciate visitor parking because, I mean, that is something that was brought up quite a bit. Can you just review why you're requesting the reduction from 1.5 to 1? And then can you talk briefly about your plan for drainage? I know that might be a little ahead of the game here, but it is a lot of questions that were brought to me. So if you could answer those, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. A request to reduce it from 1.5 to 1 per unit. It's important to note that that 1.5 includes 15% reserved for visitors. So it's not necessarily 1.5 spaces per unit plus visitor parking. So you calculate the total. In this case, it'd be about 12 spaces, 1.5 for 8 units. And then you would apply a 15% to that 12. So the reduction in to 1 is essentially the belief that this building, given that it's 1 and 2 bedroom dwelling units, that the residents are going to have 1 car per unit. The visitor parking was not included as part of the original application. There's been a lot of public feedback, and we've done quite a bit of scrambling in the last few days to prepare this revised plan that provides it. We floated it through staff. As I said, the comment that we received was that it would not necessarily be permitted as of right without council's permission to have that second vehicular access. That being said, given that we have 6 meters on that side, it would accommodate very cleanly 2 visitor parking spaces. The nice thing about separating visitor parking from resident parking is that you can sign for it. And what I mean by that is part of the development, the developer can say, you know, right at the entrance, resident parking only, don't come in here, park your car and cause a havoc. Go around the corner to King Street with very clearly marked visitor parking. We do that all the time for apartment buildings, and it's something that we could do here. It's just that it wasn't included as part of the original application. We've taken that feedback from the public that we've received, and we tried to find a solution. It's just that we can't do that solution without asking you to help us out.
Thank you. I think the drainage was the second part of the question.
Apologies. Through you, Mr. Chair. Drainage would typically be handled at the building permit process. It used to be handled through site plan control. That no longer applies. At building permit, staff could request a grading and drainage plan in order to make sure that stormwater on the property is adequately managed in accordance with the law.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a grading and drainage bylaw that's required for properties in settlement areas that are less than 1 acre in size. And so it is a requirement if a building permit were to be applied for any type of development on this property.
Thank you. Other comments from the table at present? Okay, open up to the public. Please, I guess there might be a lineup, so we'll just go first come and then line up along the wall. Please do remember to state your name and address. And gray button turns the mic on. Mic goes red when it's on. And speak pretty close to the mic so that everybody can hear you here as well as on our broadcast later.
Good evening. Before we get started, I just did have a couple of questions with regard to the parking. Having lived on Montreal Road, I'll maybe introduce myself first. Maurice Gattier. I live at 20369 Old Montreal Road with my wife Cynthia. And one of the challenges on Old Montreal Road is it's usually plowed much later than Highway 2. And quite often we have to wait. The side streets like King Street are also even more deferred than Old Montreal Road. So was that examined with anybody as far as the sequencing of snow removal? Because if you're going to have your guest parking on King Street, it's basically going to be probably a 24-hour delay before anybody could use it on a typical winter day.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question. That is something that we can discuss with our General Manager of Infrastructure Services. The snowplow routes are examined on a regular basis based on how development is occurring. so we wouldn't have that answer for you exactly this evening.
Right,
If-
well, it
If
was-
Ms. McDonald would like to add, she can, but if that information is sufficient, thank you.
And was any canvassing done with regard to any of the residents? Jacob mentioned about a 1-to-1 ratio. Most of the people I know have 2 cars because either they're working separate locations or they have different schedules, but it's pretty rare for somebody in South Lancaster to just have 1 car. Why would you have this expectation about this apartment building that it would be just 1-to-1 ratio? It seems unlikely.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair, again, the type of market that we're anticipating for this building is older people who may be looking to downsize both their property and their number of vehicles. 1-to-1 provides an option for somebody in the community who may not need more parking than that. We've heard the concerns about side street parking and that it can get pretty backed up, especially down to the wharf. So that's why we're asking to provide, through our little revised plan, the visitor parking. But we do maintain that 1-to-1 per unit is a market that would be available to some people.
Well, having acted in the past, I'm a retired lawyer, so I've acted for developers, and one of the drivers with a new project is always to fill it as soon as possible. So how would you control that it would necessarily be for older retired people?
I'll just, oh, please go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a very good comment. What's important to note about that is we don't people plan in Ontario. Outside of a few very specific student residences, retirement homes, long-term care facilities, those are buildings that are designed for a specific demographic and only available to a specific demographic. You can't go live at a res in Ottawa U, for example. So we don't people plan. But what we do is have developers who plan for a particular segment of the market based on what they believe is anticipated need. And so it's true that it's not only old people who can live here. It is available to anybody who would like to apply and who would get a lease and who would maybe have 1 vehicle, and they would be okay with that situation. You can't control for it. What we are doing is going over and above what the building code requires. As I mentioned, an elevator is not required here for a 3.5-story building. You typically aren't going to have a lot of older folks downsizing to a building without an elevator because of mobility issues. You're not going to have older folks looking for buildings with narrower hallways or narrower doorways that might limit their mobility, scooters or whatever else they might need. So it's not that the building is only designed for the elderly, and it's not limited only to the elderly. It's being designed to attract a very particular type of market, which would be elderly folks in the area who are looking to downsize. And that's why an elevator is being provided. But no, we can't control who lives here.
Right. And again, knowing banks as I do, the driver is to get your income in so that you can make your mortgage payments. It's that simple for a developer. Now, the other aspect too is in some of the things that cannot be controlled is there's a two-year waiting list for an appointment for the clinic in, to get, so the demographic may be desirable from an income point of view, but practically speaking, the hospital, there's a hospital in Alexandria, there's a hospital in Cornwall, most of the medical people and resources are in those places, so it would not profile as a place where typically an older person would choose to live because they can't get the medical help that they would need. And also, if there's a medical emergency, they're going to be quite a ways away from either one of those hospitals.
Okay, we'll go to Joe.
Mr. Mayor, the
Mr.
purpose of
Haley.
our public meeting this evening is to receive information, not to debate. So, Mr. Gassier, I would appreciate if you provide us all of your comments, and then we can move on to the next speaker, because we won't debate every one of your comments this evening.
This is not a debate. I'm asking questions. This is supposed to be questions first and then make a statement, so it's not a question of debate. The other thing, I'm disappointed. I was told that there would be no ability to do any kind of visual presentation or whatever, so we're sort of stuck with just the verbal. You know, so it's sort of a handicap in dealing with this situation. And also, it would have been very, very helpful to have your material posted to the website, not just a little one-page application. Very hard to anticipate everything that's being said here tonight with no preparation.
Okay, those are fair for public comment, but that is, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. can we just advise the public, this is a public meeting, we want you to make your comments. This isn't a theatrics. Clapping is a little unnecessary. Can we keep it professional and keep it focused? And if we can't be professional in here, can we all just be at least respectful? We're trying to,
But you can't deny this is an emotional issue for the residents of South Lancaster.
we're here to listen to an application. We want everybody's input. We're not looking to drag this out till 11 o'clock. Can we focus on the property and the building and the development? We all value your input, and we want to hear it. And that's why myself, I think almost all of us have come out and met with the public at the location. We're not looking to push this through or trying to make this look bad. We're trying to look like we want to have a good conversation here, and we want to be respectful, though, at the same time. So let's focus on going through the presentation, asking your questions, but try to keep them specific to the development at hand.
Well, I was ready to go into the presentation, and the offer was made to ask some questions. I'm just asking questions. I'm doing so very politely, very persistently perhaps, but I'm asking questions, and I do not appreciate being sort of positioned as that this is unreasonable. It's not.
And if I may, Councillor McDonnell is speaking, because I'd probably be slightly softer on this issue, and there's degrees of which we can accept comments. I probably go on a little bit too on the kindness listen side, and I'm sure, like if you're talking ends of the spectrum, Councillor McDonnell does have a point. So I don't want to throw Councillor McDonnell under the bus. He's actually trying to help me out, so I do appreciate you trying to bring it along that way. Decorum is always something. I can appreciate spontaneous laughter, but there is a quiet, like there's only 3 people, 4 or 5 we'll see that I can see. I mean, there's a whole room, but I would hope that they wouldn't laugh at your comments too much either. So we'll continue the questions about the development. So please continue, Mr. Gatchin.
Well, I do feel badly that nobody has laughed at my comments so far, but I'll tell a lawyer joke later on. Maybe we can get by with that. But essentially, we can go on with the presentation. I was approached by many people. There are 4 or 5 of us who want to speak in sequence. We all have a point to make. We want to try and avoid repetition. But as I say, the snow issue, the parking issue seems to be a hot button one. And I was just asking something as simple as, had any canvass been done to determine whether a typical resident, whether in an apartment or not, has more than 1 vehicle? It seems to be a pretty significant issue, and it's not a very hard one to figure out.
Okay, and did you not somewhat address that?
So in any event, we'll get rolling. There are a lot of people who want to speak, and it's a long night. It's hot. Right, and one of the other comments, since the gentleman mentioned about, and this will be my last question to him, he did mention about targeting a certain demographic. What is the plan for handicap parking if you're targeting older people who are going to have perhaps some issue along those lines?
Thank you for the question. So in reviewing the zoning bylaw, under 10 spaces doesn't trigger a barrier-free parking space. We have taken this comment back. We've got a design that we've looked at to include a barrier-free parking space, which will be located closest to the entrance to where the elevator is located. It would trigger a slight change to the parking area so that one of the landscape buffers on the King Street side is reduced by a couple feet just to fit it in. Because a barrier-free parking space, for those who don't know, is typically longer and wider than a regular parking space. So that's a very good comment. I take it back to our team.
Yeah, because the other aspect with regard to parking is there's no public transit, there's no bus, there's no subway station in South Lancaster. Everybody's going to be arriving by car. Every visitor, and if it's an older demographic that they're aiming for, they're going to have children, they're going to have grandchildren, they're going to come. They're not going to come by bus. They're going to come by car. That car needs to park somewhere. And it'll be more than 1 car. So it is an issue. In any event, let me go to my presentation. And as I say, we have other people who wish to speak. We've spoken with each other so that we would minimize the amount of time that would have to be taken up. Just a quick background. One of the, my wife and I have been living there since 2002. But I have a connection with South Glengarry that dates back to when I was 3 years old, which was 75 years ago. And if you do the math, you'll be able to figure out how old I am. But essentially, my father's first cousin lived in South Lancaster. We would come here, and at the time, Highway 2 was the highway to Montreal. It was the highway between Toronto and Montreal. There was no 401. And we would come into South Lancaster, and it would be like an oasis because Highway 2 was a very busy road. It's a little bit busy now, but nothing to compare to that sort of era. But for me, South Lancaster always had this peaceful, magic quality to it, which has been maintained in many ways to this day. And you'll hear some very articulate people speaking this evening about that very aspect. My other connection with South Lancaster was some years ago, my former law partner discussed with me that the province had sent a notice they wanted to remove all the boathouses on the wharf, on the public wharf. It's kind of amazing that that would be thought to be an improvement of the waterfront, but at the time that was the directive. We were able to track down postcards from before 1910 that showed that it's still, that the boathouses have been there because there's a 60-year limitations period with the province. Everywhere else, it's 40 years for anybody else, but for the province, it was 60 years that we had to track it down, and they backed away. And now we can see what an asset it is to preserve the past, and that's exactly what we're looking for this evening, is to preserve that connection. We see it on your website, we see it on the signs. This is where Ontario began. Well, we'd like to preserve that spirit. So we have and when we look at that Toronto, let's say, mindset, I sort of feel, because I lived in big cities for over 20 years, and I've now been living here for more than 20 years. There's a Glengarry way, there's a small town rural way, and there's a big city way, there's the Toronto way. And I go to Toronto frequently enough, and I go to other big cities frequently enough that I have to flip a switch in the back of my brain to adjust to what my driving is going to be like in the big city. My level of courtesy around here, my expectation of people being nice to me is much higher. And that spirit that we have got in South Lancaster is something that's precious and that we want to maintain. So the first person I'd like to ask to address is Shauna Russo. She lives right next door, and it's unfortunate that amongst the photos that were presented, there was no photo of the side of their house, where their porch is, where their child's playset is. That somehow or other got left out. And I would invite the members who will be voting on this to make sure that they see what that next door situation is going to be like. Shauna?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My husband, 8-year-old daughter, and I live right next door to this property, and I urge you to take a quick minute to envision this property and this project of this scale looming over your backyard. I wish to formally express my strong opposition to the proposed rezoning of the property in South Lancaster from its current designation to R4 in order to accommodate an 8-unit apartment building. The proposed structure, as currently planned, with some edits, will significantly overlook our home and backyard, areas where our family gathers, children play, and where we have enjoyed a reasonable expectation of privacy for many years. The scale and height of the complex, along with the placement of windows and balconies, will directly infringe upon that privacy. In addition to privacy concerns, I would also like to raise an issue that's much more difficult to quantify, but just as important: the unpredictability of tenants in a large, high-density complex. Unlike long-term homeowners, which we've come to expect and enjoy in the area, they have a vested interest in the community. Rental properties, especially those with high turnover, can bring challenges such as noise, lack of accountability, and increased traffic. We have seen examples in other neighborhoods where these types of buildings have altered the social fabric and introduced ongoing disruptions. We are not opposed to development or new housing, but we do ask that Council consider responsible growth that preserves the safety, stability, and livability of existing residential areas. We chose to make South Lancaster our home. When we chose to make South Lancaster our home, we did so intentionally, drawn by the peaceful rural lifestyle that stands in sharp contrast to the fast-paced and densely built urban areas that my husband and I deliberately left behind. We were looking for a quieter, more grounded quality of life, one that South Lancaster has always embodied. We were also attracted by the village's rich historic charm and natural beauty. This community has a unique character that is increasingly rare in Ontario: quiet, scenic, and respectful of its heritage. A high-density development of this scale threatens to permanently alter that character, both visually and culturally. Perhaps most importantly, we moved here because of the tight-knit community atmosphere. South Lancaster offers a sense of belonging, clearly, that comes from knowing your neighbors and sharing the stewardship of a small village. That kind of transient population, often associated with larger apartment complexes, could erode this close community dynamic. We strongly feel that there are better suited locations in the immediate area that are better for a development such as this, closer to amenities and school bus routes. I've been an active community member and volunteer on such boards as the Friends of the Lancaster Wharf. Our group worked with members of the community to coordinate with the owners and paint the boathouses with a beautiful display of colors resembling that of the Maritimes, a true staple of South Glengarry. I'm also the current president of the Glengarry Fish and Game Club for approximately 12 years, and we host our annual Kids Fishing Derby at the Wharf, which attracts upwards of 100 local children. Beyond personal reasons, there are broader concerns. Is the infrastructure in South Lancaster capable of supporting high-density development? Increased traffic poses safety risks that would disturb the peace of our village streets, where my youngest rides her bike and our neighbors walk their dogs. South Lancaster at this point in time is not currently equipped with sidewalks. This project would set a dangerous precedent for further rezoning requests that could drastically change the fabric of our community. I respectfully urge Council to protect what makes South Lancaster special by not destroying the very thing that brought us here in the first place. Please reject this rezoning application and instead work with the community to ensure future development aligns with the village's scale, values, and long-term vision. Thank you for your attention and your continued commitment to the residents of South Glengarry. Thank you. My address is 20382 Old Montreal Road.
I'd like to thank Shauna, and I also want to make a personal note. It was very brave of her to come up to speak publicly like this. I have a very high respect for her. Last year, 3 non-residents of South Lancaster tried to steal my vehicle. She bravely got into her car, rushed over, spooked them, went around the corner, called the police. And this is the kind of tight-knit feeling that everybody has for each other in this community. It's pretty rare. Next, Andrea.
Hello, my name is Andrea Derwin. My address is 20354 Old Montreal Road, South Lancaster. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as it relates to... Oh, sorry.
If you're like me, you kind of have to almost eat the mic, so just...
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, which we are discussing. Having moved to South Lancaster in 1963 as a child, I had the privilege of living in Inkerman Cottage, which was built in 1854 for the resident engineer of the Grand Trunk Railroad. After going away to school, and I chose to return to raise my family there. And over the years, I've seen the community evolve, with many summer cottages being replaced by year-round homes, infrastructure improvements, and more recently, development of new homes at the east end in the water treatment plant area, and also in the subdivision that runs along the west side of Military Road to the north of Lancaster, to the north of South Lancaster on the way to Lancaster. Nevertheless, the hamlet of South Lancaster, as a residential community, has retained its peaceful and historical character. Narrow streets designed for horse and buggy now shared by pedestrians and vehicles due to the lack of sidewalks. Homes are surrounded with significant green space and vegetation. Owners take pride in building on the uniqueness of their property. The vacant lot at 20378 Old Montreal Road previously contained a single-family home and is located right in the heart of the historical part of the hamlet. When the lot was bought, surely it was bought with the knowledge of the current zoning R2. Not only is it being proposed to change the zoning from R2 to R4 high density, the 7 exceptions spelled out all relate to the specified standard for setbacks and lot size in our zoning document, which makes me want to respond directly, I guess, Jacob, to your comment about one of the exceptions is that it has been being recognized that the frontage is 27.8 meters, which for R4 designated property, you need 30 meters. But for R2, 15 meters is enough. Because I also thought, oh, maybe they could split the property and put a couple of duplexes instead, and which would allow more housing, but wouldn't involve an apartment building. And I couldn't hear all of your presentation when you got into the details, but somehow you evolved to presenting this scenario where potentially there could be up to 12 dwelling units placed on the property. But again, you were saying we would almost be there. We would almost be there. So again, I felt your presentation was misleading because, again, you were trying to present the scenario that allowing 8 units was a significant improvement over the potential for 12. And I don't know if you could, want to say something about that, but to clarify.
Please do, if there is.
Thank you very much for the question. Certainly, it's not my intent to mislead you. What I was trying to express is that under the R2 zone, you can build semi-detached dwellings. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we would be able to sever the lot mm-hmm. and build one set of semis as of right, mm-hmm. Meaning both halves. Mm-hmm. And within each of those halves, under the province of Ontario, you can now have up to 3 units. Mm-hmm. So that would be 6. Mm-hmm. What I was showing with my other example is that each semi technically only needs an area of 270 square meters, mm-hmm. meaning that at a lot area of 1,055, realistically, we're very close. And again, we wouldn't need an amendment. It's not as of right. But the total would be 1,080. So we could be here for a zoning bylaw amendment to propose 4 lots at 270, which would be at 3 units each, a total of 12 units. To be very clear, that's not as of right. It would still require a minor variance. It would still require, or a zoning bylaw amendment. What I'm simply pointing out is this is a very large lot that could easily get 6 units as of right through the R2 zoning, and with a minor tweak to the lot area, go up to about 12. It was conceptual. I apologize if it was misleading or if it presented a density that is not permitted. So just for clarity, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that clarification.
Okay, but again, you said it's very close. So I'd just like to make that point. And there is adequate frontage as the lot stands for R2. Okay. So I'd just like to finish with pointing out that the municipal plan is for the common good of the community, not for corporations seeking to turn a profit at the expense and well-being of the taxpayers. The planning group has failed to present reasons why this project would be a benefit to the community. One cornerstone of the community planning relies on achieving a result that is supported by the majority of stakeholders. I did a little research and reading, which is my nature, and I did a little reading, and characteristics of a successful community include choosing amongst development projects, paying attention to community aesthetics, and cooperating with neighbors for mutual benefit. Clearly, these principles would not be met if this project is approved. I respectfully request that this application be denied. Thank you.
One of the things that I think would be useful would be to take a brief pause. A lot of us could use a bathroom break, and given the age profile of a lot of the people here, would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, I had thought earlier that I drink a lot of water, so I would be okay with a quick, is there a method I can just call a recess? That's, okay, well, right now it is 7:57. Can I call one? Sorry, I just want to make sure procedurally, I haven't asked this. All right, we'll take a recess. We'll be back at 8:05. Okay, welcome back. So we will go to the next speaker, whoever that may be. Please address your name and your address.
Carolyn Powell, 6378 Bayshore Lane. I'll be brief, and I don't really have questions. It is emotional, but we can't deny that it's emotional. So my husband Glenn and I retired here 3 years ago, so we're pretty new residents to Lancaster. We're pretty nearly seniors, but we bought a bungalow, and it works great. I'm in agreement with what everyone has said. I just want to add maybe our own perspective. We also feel deeply affected by the proposed zoning changes that could be possible. People don't choose where to live randomly. We took a thoughtful approach to find the right community where we could see ourselves living the next chapter of our lives. I took a full year to find that place. When we discovered South Lancaster, we knew it was the right place for us, and so far we haven't been wrong. South Lancaster is known for its historical buildings. The Inkerman Cottage, Moosehead Inn, Stickler House, the Miller Brown Inn, and our beloved Lancaster Wharf. We've come to know our hamlet as unique in that we are all neighbors. We all walk the roads, kids ride their bikes, everyone waves and often stops to chat. We pat each other's dogs, and we look out for one another. It's quiet, safe, and slow-paced. This kind of community bond is vital to our way of life. We feel so fortunate to be living under the spell of Lancaster. If you lived here, you would recognize how special it is. We're concerned that this zoning change, if granted, will open the door for many more of its kind. Construction that will permanently alter the lifestyle we so dearly treasure and ultimately decrease the value of our homes. We have already put a new roof on our house, installed ductwork, and had a new gas furnace. We're investing in our house. We don't want to feel forced out of our neighborhood if it is allowed to morph into something we did not choose. Development is inevitable, but it must fit within the framework of its community. There must be a time when the uprising of a community, however small, has enough impact to be respected. Lancaster has been developed with sidewalks, stores, apartments, restaurants, a bank, a library, and several businesses. It makes sense for the village to grow as it has. We are not a village, we are a hamlet. Let us remain as one of the few gems where people want to live and visitors love to frequent.
Thank you. Again, next speaker, we could have name and address, and turns red and speak into the microphone. Oh, the button gris.
Okay. Is that good? Everyone can hear me? My name's Claude Léger. I'm at 6394 Harkness Drive. I have to echo Mo's point about not getting all of these specifics about the applications for the variance, because that would have been more helpful for most people here to be able to prepare a presentation that hits the points that we're trying to uphold here of our community. But I'm going to talk to you about a little boy, and that little boy is me. So as a Cornwall youngster, I remember visiting South Lancaster and being intrigued about the history and uniqueness of the community. I was in awe of the narrow roads leading to the wharf, the boathouses, the old buildings, which are people's residence, the church, and the old cemetery, which is at the heart of the hamlet. These memories of Lake St. Francis and discovering cottage country remain with me throughout my lifetime. My career led me from Eastern Ontario, and we primarily resided in the Greater Toronto area. However, upon retiring, it afforded us the opportunity to return to our roots. When we returned to South Lancaster, I was extremely pleased to discover that charm and characteristic of the hamlet from my youth still existed, and it was like stepping back in time. And with slight transformations from mostly cottages to now beautiful and unique single-family dwellings, we decided to buy a place in this corner of paradise. Over the last few years, we have learned from some of the historical significance of the hamlet, the importance of the wharf and waterway that helped establish our community, Williamstown and Martintown, Old Hotel, Margaret's Place, and the Moosehead Inn, the church and the old cemetery, as well as, to me, this is a critical piece, the Bethune Loyalist land grant from the King of England, and seeing the King's document exemplifies the historic significance of the community. The above noted are only small examples of the pride the people have in South Lancaster. Upon hearing of the proposed building project and changes to the building code, the variance and standard bylaws in order to build a proposed multi-resident unit goes against the uniqueness and historical charm of South Lancaster. The variance in question and size of the project will lead to community safety concerns for all residents, from emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, and municipal vehicles, the garbage trucks as an example, entering narrow streets due to excessive parking issues along the wharf and the side streets, which will ultimately impact the safety of all the walkers, the dog walkers, seniors with some mobility issues, and cyclists, given that there is no sidewalk or room to build them. These issues will only be exacerbated during the winter months due to snow plowing. Our hearts go out to the Russos, to the Noseworthies, the Davies families, who will be directly impacted by this proposal. The proposed building will be an eyesore and doesn't conform to the existing characteristics of the community. It will have a devastating impact on the historical nature of the hamlet and is detrimental to our way of life. In addition, upon hearing that there is now an application for severance lot concession 1, lot 37, application number B5825, part of the original Bethune land grant to the development group, it feels like our community way of life will be severely impacted. In a way, it feels like I'm now writing an obituary for the hamlet of South Lancaster. It is imperative that council sides with the residents of our community by maintaining the standards and bylaws to adhere to the historic nature and charm of this historic place. If council and the councilors go against the wishes of the community by allowing high-density multi-resident unit, it will definitely be a nail in the coffin to this historic place and will change the fabric of our hamlet forever. I signed it off as a boy and now a resident, still in awe of South Lancaster. At this time, I want to introduce Glenn Bethune. He's part of the original homestead of going back many, many generations. He has a few words he wants to say.
Just remember to say your address as well. This is your name.
Glenn Bethune from 6380 Harkness Drive, South Lancaster. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I probably represent one of the oldest families in South Lancaster, living there for over 230 years. And my sister, who is currently 90 years old, and one of the oldest residents in the town right now, her son wrote a letter which was sent today. We just received it just before we came over here. But I'd like to just read one little insert that he has in here that is very interesting. So we'll go ahead and do that. His name is David Cheatham. I am, however, a practicing professor of archaeology, a prehistorian with over 100 publications to my credit. Much of my published work, which spans for decades, concerns the style of building landscapes, how changes in the style interact with the shape of other cultural practices. In short, buildings are not just passive boxes, they are active components of life, of those who use them, see them, and so on. What you are proposing to South Lancaster would change that relationship and, without question, the very existence of this hamlet. Thank you.
If the next speaker could introduce himself, name and address again?
Yeah. I have to repeat it, my name again and my address? Or the next person you're talking about?
Oh,
Okay, I've already disclosed it.
okay. Well, I suppose, like in the nature, it would be normally we go through the line and then you're
Right,
kind
but
of.
we're just acting, I'm just acting as the bridge between the various people. And, you know, because we did not have the benefit of seeing all of the material in advance, and we had planned, we had hoped to do a visual presentation as well. We were told we wouldn't be able to. We now see that all the equipment to do so is here. So we're acting, you know, sort of trying to spontaneously deal with this as well as we can. So if you could just bear with us and be patient.
Oh,
We want to get through all the material.
Oh, yes, we're glad.
Okay,
It just,
so
it
a lot of
seems-
people want to speak, and some of us had covered some of the things that we wanted to say, and we tried to be coordinated a bit so there wouldn't be too much repetition.
Okay,
So
no,
we're
I
trying to
do-
be respectful of your
we
time.
do appreciate that, because I could imagine we could have 100 people say 12 of the same things, and I'm not trying to be rude to you in any way, I just.
No, I don't take it that way, but my home has been, you know, receiving a lot of people and basically trying to sort of filter through all of this so that we could be respectful of your time.
Oh, yes, yeah, and
So
I guess.
a lot of effort has gone into it beforehand.
Okay.
Okay, including, you know, the gentleman, Mr. Bethune, or Mr. Cheatham, I've dealt with him. His mom lives right next door to us. She's 90 years old. We've had to coordinate some issues. He calls from Los Angeles, has a lot of affection for the community and understands it quite well. So it was nice that he took the time to write this very eloquent note.
Oh, yes.
So we'll just have a transition here to Mark Lancier's. Mark, sorry.
Just, again, your name and address?
Yeah, Mark Lancier, 6423 Karen View Road. So I'll make sure it's different. I'll be as different as I can. So I like music, and one of my favorites is Joni Mitchell. And how does that song go? You don't know what you have till it's gone. So we have to make sure we know that once it goes, what it is, so we can make the right decision. I'm not telling people how to make, what decision to make, but today I'll try to hope in telling people how to make the decision. So the process is, when you follow the right process, usually you get the right result. And so I hope there's Joni fans in there. So where does this start? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the reason I'd be here today is that I was interested in that particular lot. I wanted it. Why? Because Ron Rayside wanted it. Why did Ron Rayside want it? He said, this is a historic house, not just historic for South Lancaster, Ontario, wide historic. So I go, how do I get this house? And so I started bidding on it with Rick Nielsen. So Rick Nielsen is probably the only person in Southern Ontario who would be crazy enough and clever enough to take the house, lift it, and fix it from underneath. So that it's a wood house, you know. So I tried to get it. I wanted to get it, but we gave up. We lost the bid 3 times. So we got it, and then we lost it. So it was toggling between 2 real estate agents, you know. At the price we lost it, it resold 2 years later for 3 times what the price was. And then recently resold for now more than 4 times. And so what I think is happening, because I ran a business for a long time, is that there's a lot of money paid for that property, and the only way to get the ROI on it, to get the return on investment, is this proposal. So the intention of the people that are proposing this has nothing to do with this township. It has to do with ROI, return on investment, and you need it quick. That's business. Business people own this place. business people do these types of things. And let's talk about the real subject. And that's what it is, a quick return on it. Now, do any of us here have any reason to participate in this? Do we have any moral obligation or legal obligation to help these people with their ROI? I say no. So if we're trying to do some kind of like nice gesture, because what I've heard is they're nice people. The people who own this thing happen to be nice. So it's not easy for all the friends and family to say, oops, we're not going to help you. This project has nothing to do with the person. It has to do with the project. And anybody here who is going to help this guy get their ROI up for this thing is wrong. It is wrong. The intention, and I know it because I know who had it, I know who owned it, I know what the gig is. It's not about helping the community. It's not about the age and that type of thing. They came with that later. I talked to the guy directly. I know what the story is on this development. The intention of it has zero to do with what is being presented. That's not what it's for. It is to try to make money quickly, and who's going to pay for it? Us. We're not paying for it. Is that good? So what I did is I took pictures. I'm almost done. So these are the pictures of the 4 houses closest together in a line. I went to measure the houses, height, width, that type of thing, and I put the 4 of them in a line so we could see what they look like. As the previous people suggested, how does it fit? And so I was reminded as a 5-year-old, how do you make a decision when you have 4 things and you're trying to see what fits or not? Bob and Susan. Don't know? You don't know Bob and Susan?
I know Bob Ross.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not the same. One of these things is not like the other. Can you guess which one it is? And so
we are getting a little bit into theatrics here. I feel, I don't know if you're intentionally, but it does feel like you're kind of making fun of council, which is unacceptable. Are you not kind of mocking us? Although I do appreciate, there is a comment there, like, I don't think council's under the, like, we're not lost that businesses do have an ROI, yet they can build, like, that would be one question following I will ask later, but,
yep.
Because, like, there'd probably be options, as I, like, to go to, like, R2 zoning, like, what does that mean, what does that look like? Like, those are things that, like, depending on how council goes, that are curious questions to me, because you never know if it's, like, if say...
All I'm saying is, when you're 5 years old, you're pure when you make your decision. Stay pure, make your decision with the information that you have. It's not that hard to make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last person in our group is Mr. Ron Rayside. Ron?
Not sure it's a good idea to follow Mark, but anyway. I won't repeat what everyone has said already. I'm at 20399 Water Street. Family has occupied that house for 100 years, and the family before that was in Inkerman Cottage. So, been involved. I'm an architect, and I've been doing architecture and urban planning for 50 years. Have been involved in a few heritage kind of projects in the township, the library, the Bishop's House, and we have a designated house by South Glengarry So when there were no measures mentioned to how to prevent demolition, I don't know how, but it's a bronze plaque that's stuck on the front of our house in 2003. And my understanding was, and we did that purposely, that that would prevent someone from demolishing that house. And every renovation, we have to ask permission. It's not hard permission to get, but we do have to ask. And it's a 230-year-old house. It's the same age as the house that was demolished, by the way. There were two sister buildings built about the same time, right at the beginning of the village. So, and the heritage quality of the village doesn't come down to just the buildings. It's the way things were laid out, the lot sizes, the scale of the house, and urban planners know about scale in a small village. 1-2 stories is the maximum almost everywhere in that R2 existing zoning. So, and there's been a lot of legal presentations about what are the planning regulations are and what the township has the right or not. And I think it's the obligation, my point of view, it's the obligation of council to reject this project, not just from legal grounds, but from moral grounds. And including any variations to have either 8, 12, or whatever number of units, it has to come down to 2. I don't think you should allow anything to destroy the scale of the village. If this was in Williamstown, I think you'd get the same kind of crowd out to oppose this project. In Martintown would be the same thing. I think people do, and the consequences of accepting this is speculation on every empty piece of land and even built lands. So this is just, and Claude Léger mentioned it and Mark raised it, this is just a first of very bad news in the future. And if you want to eliminate, not just, it's not a legal argument. There is legal arguments, and we know planning as well as anyone. But if that's what you're sticking to, then I think it's a major mistake in terms of the future of what the village should be. So that.
Thank you. And if I just might address Mr. Lanthe, I asked if you were mocking us, and I've said no. So you may speak more enthusiastically. I'm more understated, so I apologize if I took your enthusiasm. You'd be probably much more fun to work with because I lack that je ne sais quoi. So I apologize for saying the mocking. Next speaker, name and address.
Hi, my name is Julie Hare. I live at 20377 Bethune Street. So we're right on the corner of King and Bethune. Our home is right on the road. If you look at city or the planning permits, everything goes through our living room. The snowplow goes by, it hits our porch every winter. We do have a variance for our porch. That porch predates, I don't know what. Sorry, Joanne. And I do have a couple of questions or maybe statements on the fact you mentioned that there was an EA done on this site. With that EA, did it include a soil sampling, or did you drill down to test how far the water table is?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, we didn't mention that there was an EA done on the site.
Oh,
I think that's...
I thought I heard something like an EA or an environmental assessment.
That was for the first public meeting, and
Okay.
not to deal with this property that I was talking about, the environmental impact assessment.
Okay, so that was my misunderstanding. Just because I know for a fact, because when I went to environmental college, St. Lawrence College, I graduated with environmental technologies certificate. And during my course, we actually drilled down in South Lancaster on our property just for an informal environmental assessment. The water table is only 3 feet deep. Now, digging on the property in question would actually adversely affect the property right beside. It will make vibrations which will rattle the house beside and make the foundation crumble. Yes. We have stone foundations. We repaired ours 2 years ago. It cost us $27,000. And the reason why we repaired it is because we are also on a fault line. When buses drive by or trucks drive by, when the snowplow drives by, our house shakes. Everything on the walls rattle. So with heavy equipment, diggers, dozers, removal trucks, the house next door is going to shake. What impact are these neighbors going to have? I can't imagine those poor neighbors. Sorry, Shauna, I don't even know where you are. I didn't even know if you realized how much that's going to impact your home. You also touched on ditches for water drainage. South Lancaster does not have a down gradient. Our ditches flood every year, and you guys know it, you get complaints. So if there's no down gradient, where is the water going to go? It's going to flood your apartment, it's going to flood Shauna's house, it's going to flood the Noseworthies, it's going to flood on the other side of the street as well. It's not, in my opinion, just in my opinion alone, and from what I studied in college, this is not a good idea. Please take your building and build it elsewhere, just not in our hamlet.
Again, just to make sure your microphone is on, it's the gray button, turns red, and name and address. Gray button in the center of the console.
Hi there. I think many of you know me. I'm vocal enough. I'm on Facebook all the time, Lancaster Village, and the I Love South Lancaster. I communicate with you because I don't want to do this through law firms. I am a victim of abuse and neglect by this township. First of all, let's get a little bit of history here. My family goes back 5 generations. My grandfather was the doctor here. My father was a retired dentist here who provided free legal service for many of these residents because they could not afford it. I served this community for 27 years. I testified to protect this community. I had a fallout. I stayed. Everybody else left. I stayed because I belong here. And I'm going to tell you something. You built a house right next door to me. You made provisions. You made adjustments. Okay? That was not supposed to happen.
Is this about this property?
Now, hold on, because these people are going to have the same impact that it had on me. What about your foundations? I have a kick-ass foundation. They don't. When the excavation was done, it broke my window and it put a split in my ceiling. Did I go after damages? No, because I didn't want to cause problems. I came in with the Stidwell Foundation. They overrided the Stidwell Foundation, and I have been flooded. You have seen the pictures of me flooded, not 1 year, not 2 years, 3 years. Okay? Now, they said that they were going to do the final grading. They never did the final grading. Instead, they moved. Now I have people next door. When we talk about parking, there's supposed to be 2 parking per house. They have 5. The other side of me, there's supposed to be 2 houses. They have 4. You want to talk about my side street? It is blocked both sides of the street. You want to talk about congestion? Fire services would never be able to get through the property if it was winter. So you want to know what it has caused? Bitter neighbor disputes to the point that the police are at the door. That's what you have created because you failed me and you failed the people. Thank you.
All right. Name and address.
Okay, it works. My name is Blake McDonnell. I live in Lancaster, 21 Oak Street. I'm just here to support South Lancaster. I go to South Lancaster pretty often, and the thing I appreciate the most about South Lancaster is there's no tall buildings there. So I'll get right to the point. I feel this building will be taller than the canopy of the trees, and I feel it'll set a precedent for buildings to come. In 10 years, I'd be afraid to see what South Lancaster would look like if this apartment was allowed to build. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So then, that is the, seems, there's, okay, another member of the audience?
Okay.
Again, please state your name and address.
I think the mic is up, yes, okay. So my name is Gilles Charbonneau. I live in South Lancaster, 20514. I'm very low profile. I moved to the county in year 2000 in Cornwall. Nobody knows me, I guess, But at one point, I'm only saying that because I want to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from. I was one of the biggest landlords in Cornwall. So I know the business. I'm a landlord, right in the bone. I know exactly, are you the developer? No? No? So I don't know, is the developer here? You're the developer? Okay. So I know where he's coming from. I can represent both sides because I live in the hamlet and I'm a landlord, a retired landlord. So I know both sides of the story. So a multiplex, by definition, is a business. It's not an investment you're going to live in. It's a business. It'll be the first one in the hamlet on our street, okay? And that creates a big precedent, huge precedent. Because if you allow that, I'm going to ask you, same thing myself. I got 8 acres. I'm going to ask you the same thing, Joanne. And you won't be able to say no to me, okay? I'm going to build 32 plex. What are you going to do? So that's the basic of it. It's a business. And you have to be very careful. And a lot of people are very emotional, but I would like to bring you an aspect. I'm from Montreal myself originally. Now I live here. I'm very happy with the hamlet. If you ever visit Old Montreal, there's an underground city there. I think it's called Lance of Beaufils. And there's thousands and millions of people visit Montreal for that, okay? 100 years ago, if the council down there 100 years ago would have accepted to build multiplexes right in the Old Montreal, you wouldn't have what we have right now at the Old Montreal city. Same thing applies for this hamlet here. It's historic. I know. You know it, okay? And all of us here in 100 years, we won't be here. Nobody of us will be here in 100 years. But they'll remember who made the decision to preserve that. And there's a big possibility that this thing will be a great source of tourism, income, and proudness to be first in Ontario. You have to remember that. You have to protect that. And I'm telling you from both sides of business. I can develop the whole hamlet if I want to, but I won't. And for the developer, I don't know if Mr. Nantier was right, but maybe he stuck with the deal that he was promised that he could develop multiplex on it. But if you got that promise, it was wrong. No promise? So why don't you build it somewhere else? There's so much place available. Why choose this hamlet? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
The corner. So if you build it and the city accepts you build it, I'll make you an offer. I'll give you 20% more the next day.
All right, well, you're supposed
No,
to
but
talk about this,
I'm trying to make a point
if
here.
you wish to conduct
I'm
business, you can do it outside of our council halls.
But you understand what I'm trying to say here? It's very
I
important.
think we've heard you loud and clear, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
you for your time. Don't do it. It's a precedent that you will regret. And think about 100 years from now.
Okay, at this point, are there any other members of the community at large that wish to speak? If you'd like to please come up to the microphone and state your name and address.
My name is Stefan Feach, 6393 Cairnview Road. I'm one of those people that also returned to South Lancaster. I lived in Munich, Germany, up until about 7 years ago. I only spent 6 months of the year here, but it's a privilege to live here, to see my friends again. I find it rather unique that the developer has not stepped up to the microphone tonight and said the reason why he is developing that particular piece of property. And I'd like to hear his commitment to the community. And after hearing everything that's been said tonight, what his take is on his development plans. Thank you.
I suppose the hard thing there is the developer is free to choose to delegate his authority of the presentation, and I think has done so to a planner just to speak, I guess, like, I can't speak from a planning perspective, so I'm sure, like, in this case, a planner is brought forth, but if the developer would wish to speak, you're more than welcome to or represent on your behalf. Okay. Your name and an address again?
Leslie Thompson, 1518 Stephen. I don't represent the developer, but I am a friend of the developer, and I want to speak to his character. I think that it's been incredibly unfair the way that the community has represented this investment that they are making in this community, not just with this project, but with many other projects that they have done. They are from this community, and they are investing over and above what is the bare minimum on this site to make sure that it appeals to the existing characteristic of the community. You could have a black box, 3-story, flat roof here, no problem, and you wouldn't need any bylaw amendments. They're going over and above to put in an elevator. They're going over and above to design it passively, so it's 15% more in investments. They have donated to this community personally, time and time again, their time, their money, and it's just disappointing that there's so much not in my backyard appetite. I love this community. I can see what you can do when you get your mind, up, you can defend your schools. But what happens when there's no more developers because you've chased them out? Because your high school is down to 200 kids. Your businesses, I've seen them, they're going out of business. If you don't bring people to this community, your heritage is going to be gone. So there has to be a push and pull. And I think if you were actually to sit down with the developers, you would see that they're very willing and open to make concessions, to make adjustments, but to come out and attack their character and say that this is based on ROI is completely false. And I want to set the record straight, at least for that, because they're valuable members of this community. They give a lot personally, they give a lot financially, they're investing a lot in this, and there are a lot of different ways they could have done this development to make a lot more money, but they haven't. That is not their priority. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. With that,
I got a comment.
are there any?
If I could. Sure. Sean Faulkner from 6389 King Street, directly across the road from what you're trying to do. And just a comment about this flat roof versus pitch roof thing, because everyone else has a pitch roof in town. A pitch roof is cheap, about 8 times as cheap as a flat roof. And it makes all the drainage problem that comes off of that roof everyone else's problem. A flat roof, the drainage problem is his problem, and the township's problem, what they're going to do with all this water. The extra foot that you're getting out of this thing, or the extra 3 feet that you're proposing for this elevator shaft, that's crazy talk, man. Elevator shaft, 8 times the cost for a flat roof. How much are you raising the grade on the property? This 12 meters are going to go above that new grade?
Ms. Haley, just so is it okay to have this question asked? Sometimes, like, we don't have a lot of public meetings. I probably, like, just procedurally.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of tonight's public meeting is to determine if a zoning amendment can be supported or not. If a zoning amendment is approved, it sets the principles of development. Then the next stage would be to go to a full design stage that would incorporate a grading and drainage plan and a complete set of architectural plans. So we're not at this stage of the process to answer that question as of yet, but as I mentioned previously, they are obligated to submit a grading and drainage plan that is prepared by a professional. Thank you.
So all this being speculation of old people moving in and speculating that this is going to be such a thing is all a pipe dream. They don't have any idea that the old people are going to move to town. What, 80-year-old, 90-year-old people in wheelchairs that are using elevators are going to be going down to the wharf to go kayaking? No, that's not going to happen. That's all I got.
I'm good at that.
I'll have a few more remarks to make, and then we can conclude. But before I do so, Sean Russo would like to say a few more words.
Okay.
Thank you again. To your comments about the character of the developer, that's never our dispute as directly being impacted. We actually ran into him outside of the township building, and your speech sounds verbatim to the conversation that we had. We together could have sat down and had a conversation. It was always, well, you could have came to us. Well, we're neighbors. Be neighborly. This is not neighborly. We don't want to sit down and have a pissing match about it. We want to work together to make it ideal for the two of us. We understand you're a developer and it is a business, but we are not putting down your character. We've worked with you over many years. I've worked with you with the Kids Fishing Game Club Fishing Derby, and we were friends. This is how friendship ends. because we haven't been able to come together and communicate with each other. So I open the floor and offer that opportunity to potentially get together and discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you. And this, Mr. Gatchain, is this
To
closing?
to that,
you're
to that
essentially
particular
offering-
point, let me add that the developers, you know, have a fine reputation. It's actually a bit of a mystery to everybody why they've gone in this direction, because it does seem out of character. And by the way, to the young lady's point, everybody in the community has contributed to in different ways to charities and whatever. So it's not unique to them, okay? Because on that basis, I mean, everybody would start contributing to fishing derbies if they felt that this is going to get them some rezoning. You know, we'd all do that. So that's, we've actually purposely tonight very much stayed away from any form of character aspects or whatever, and really focused our comments on the project itself. And one of the things is that with regard to the NIMBY aspect, and I was looking for some quotes about that, and one of the things that was pointed out in some of the studies I looked at was the greater good, in parentheses, is always abstract, but the local harm is always very specific. So we've articulated tonight the various ways in which this is specifically going to be harmful to this community. So my overall view, having spent time in big cities and now have had the privilege of living in South Lancaster, you know, let the dollars land in Toronto and in the big places, but let the butterflies land in South Lancaster. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I suppose then that is the organized portion for this. Is there any further comments? Okay, great. So then no decision will be taken this evening. I don't think there's any comments from around the table at this present time. Okay. So no decision has been taken this evening, so that will conclude the public meeting 6B zoning bylaw 0625 Impala Development Incorporated, and we'll get into the rest of our meeting, and this is action requests. So at this point, you're all willing, you're all able to stay, but I imagine many of you would probably want to get home to perhaps a cooler environment and let's say a hockey game, but that's done. Okay, so action requests. It is to appoint the municipal auditors for the 2023 to 2025 inclusive. We'll just take a moment until people clear out behind you for the microphones, but this will be brought to you by Ms. MacDonald. Okay, we are going to appoint municipal auditors. Moved by Councillor Bougie. Oh. Yep. Everybody, if we could have the meeting progress. Councillors, apologize for cutting some of your conversation short, but we are now 8:50. Some of us might have to drive to Barrie this evening. Got to get a kilt. We might go to close, move to go closed. There is a closed session item on the agenda too. Would you like to go to that immediately or just a? It would be, but there are members of public too, so kind of, we should move on because the Don Costas are here as well. Okay.
All right.
Perfect. Then we'll move to action requests to appoint municipal auditors, moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-74 be received and that council hereby appoint MNP LLP as the auditors for the Township of South Glengarry for fiscal years 2023 to 2025, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign all relevant documents. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So this evening, the request before council is to appoint MNP. They were our auditors previously, up until 2021. The amount of the cost of the audit has gone up over the last few years, so it is slightly over budget, as noted in the report. However, we have had some savings in salary within general government in 2023, so I think that will more than offset the variance.
All right, are there any questions or comments of council present? All those in favor? Carried. Moving to Place Saint Laurent Phase 3, final acceptance. This is Ms. McDonald. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-67 be received and that the council of the Township of South Glengarry direct the General Manager of Infrastructure Services to issue the final acceptance of the works for Place Saint Laurent Phase 3 and release any remaining security. And furthermore, that the works within the stormwater block, blocks 30, 31, 35, and 36, in registered plan 14M9 are hereby assumed. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is fairly straightforward. It's a housekeeping item for accepting the works, and for the most part, with the exception of the storm pond, which we intentionally have not accepted until now. Administration wanted to wait for the many years until full build out of, or close to full build out of the entire subdivision had been reached to confirm that the performance of the storm pond met our satisfaction. The RRCA did provide their final clearance a few weeks ago. So by passing this resolution, we'll be accepting Place Saint Laurent Phase 3 that was fully built out 10 years ago, the storm pond, and then directing us, administration, to transfer those swim blocks to ourselves for future maintenance. In keeping with the request from council to have the budget, I suppose, impacts, we have provided that table. I would note to council there's really no choice since we've agreed to accept this infrastructure through the subdivision agreement, but it's interesting to note excuse me, for future subdivision agreements. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from around the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. So award RFP 2025-10, third line bridge rehabilitation, moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-68 be received and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry award RFP 2025-10 for the third line bridge rehabilitation to Clearwater Structures Incorporated in accordance with their submission of $636,592.90 excluding HST, and furthermore that the General Manager of Infrastructure Services be authorized to sign all appropriate tender documents. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is also fairly straightforward. You'll note in the table in item 7 that we're projecting a deficit of $22,000 for this project. That is only if we pick up every provisional item noted in the contract. We believe that the project will be under budget. We will track the itemized expenditures as we go along, and if we have funding to do those provisional items, they're kind of like nice to haves, we'll do them, and if it would put us over budget as a township, then we will exclude them from the contractor's work. So just don't be scared about that deficit. We don't project that or anticipate that we'll have one. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through Mayor McDonald. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for bringing this to our attention, moving this along. I apologize if you've already given us this information, but When do we expect the work to start, and when do we expect it to be completed?
Excellent question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Off the top of, we haven't received, because the work hasn't been awarded, we don't have a construction schedule, but it is our understanding that it will begin in a few weeks and be completed by the end of October. Our contract is set up so that any works don't impact, or hope not to impact, harvest operations.
Thank you very much.
Any further comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Lang?
Quick, just a one-lane closure, not a full closure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe it is a full closure. Question mark. I can report back to council.
Okay, because I know sometimes the county does one or the other, and sometimes you save money by closing both, so I don't know if we'll see that eventually. Okay. Any further questions, or do you want to defer it based on that question? Okay. All those, Councillor McDonnell?
Just if we could get an answer back through you, Mr. Mayor, just for, there is maybe one or two farm operations that would be impacted by a full closure, and just that we can make them aware and they can be prepared for that if possible. So,
Future info report stating as much, or an update in one of the quarterly? Email, yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, before we undertake any project, we do circulate a notice to the adjacent homeowners, and we have in the past year been sending those notices to council also, so that you're aware. So if that notice is sufficient, then you'll get the notice that we send everyone. We can also email.
Satisfactory? Okay. All those in favor of the motion as read? Carried. Moving to bylaws. Solid Waste Management Plan, third and final reading. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Staff Report 2025-69 be received, and that Bylaw 2025-28, being a bylaw to regulate the collection and management of solid waste in the Township of South Glengarry, be read a third and final time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 23rd day of June 2025. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This bylaw was read a first and second time at our last council meeting. The only change that we've made to the bylaw is noted in the report, and it is to add the word, shingles to Schedule F, Item 2 as AIV. Does that make sense? I believe there was some chatter about the impact of not allowing any type of residential demolition in something larger than a dump trailer, and I have a few statistics for council's consideration tonight. Through our quarterly report, our fourth quarter report, our planning, buildings, and enforcement folks reported that over the last 4 years, we've issued for demolition permits 12, 13, 18, and 20. So an annual average of like 16 demolition permits each year. Operationally, when we start, it's challenging to have the frontline worker differentiate between the type of material that's received in a vehicle or any type of transport. So eliminating tandems and hire makes it easy, it's very easy and clear for the attendant to say, no, we don't accept that. When you start opening up and muddying the waters, at some point there will be fatigue from the attendant, and we'll just allow things in, is my expectation. However, that would be council's decision.
Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just I guess maybe if staff can confirm for myself, I did speak with a local excavating company, and they did inform us that whenever it's not as if myself, where I show up at the dump with my dump trailer and I'm dumping off some household waste or whatever the case may be, they do have to prepay for every load and have to physically go down to the office. Would it not be fairly simple that we don't issue tandem dump passes without proof of demolition permit or something along those lines, something for consideration? I don't know if there's appetite from council, but I feel it would kind of alleviate the issue. If they've got a demolition permit in the Township of South Glengarry, they should realistically, I feel it would be a service I would like to see continue if possible, but I feel it would be fairly streamlined that way, or if there's a reason that it would be even more difficult if they're already prepaying those with a permit.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's the option to prepay, but some folks do pay at the landfill with the attendant. So it would be the same thing. They show up with a load and they want to pay on site.
We could just eliminate pay on site then at that point. And just, you have to go to the office if you want to. They want that service extended. We'll have to make it a little more difficult, but it'll ensure that we're only getting South Glengarry demolition products.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McDonald. I believe I've also spoke with the same local contractor that Councillor McDonnell mentioned. And I guess just to give a bit more context to it, just maybe for I'm not sure if everyone would have had the same information, but that as Ms. McDonald explained, there's, that the number of demolitions within South Glengarry, let's say at average that she provided was around 15, 16. This local contractor was explaining that if those loads would be diverted, let's say to La Flèche, or as an example, then it would likely double the cost of the demolition to the resident because of the additional time and let's say an excavator demolishing can't do it all in one day because the trucks can't all come back and forth 10, 15 times from one day going back and forth to, let's say, Moose Creek. So I wanted to just provide that context to see if folks don't have it, if that is something that we think is, as a council, material to the decision to not allow that kind of waste. Do we think that that's something that residents, obviously, I think everyone's in agreement that we don't want that kind of waste coming from outside of South Glengarry. But I'm not sure if there's appetite around the table to look at that one specifically. I'm sorry to Ms. McDonald to bringing this up sort of at the 11th hour, but this conversation I only had today, and it's new information for myself. So I thought, just out of respect for the individual, to bring it up here.
Right, is there appetite for that? I suppose, like, as you're saying, like, there's a cost to the person who's having the house demolished, or there's a cost to everybody else kind of absorbs it, so it depends how we feel about that, like the pinch point. Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm okay having the conversation. We're kind of at the 11th hour here, though, but I worry that the cost is doubling, though, because our tipping fees are a lot less than if they go to La Flèche. Like, I'd like to see our fees. If it's just a matter of travel, it's one thing, it's good to give our residents that option, but I don't want to be so cheap, and I have a feeling we are, because it seems the trucks are coming in from all over the place, or trying to come in from all over the place, and I think we've been trying to address it at the landfill, but are our tipping fees too low that, and I know we don't have a scale, and it's very difficult without a scale to kind of match fee for fee, but we need to be somewhere in the ballpark.
And some of that can be addressed with the incoming comprehensive fee bylaw as it becomes an annual thing, but that is a fair point. So, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was also expressed to me that it wasn't the cost of tipping; it was more the extended travel from, example, Curry Hill or Baynesville to La Flèche, just to dump a tandem load of demolished material. It would take so much time and effort to make that trip to return.
All right. And last meeting, Ms. McDonald, did we have an average demolition, like the amount of trucks? Was it not like a decent amount, or am I imagining that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the last round of tandems that we did not accept they said they'd had 20 for a demolition down on the front somewhere.
And what would the weekly garbage be about? It was 8?
Yeah, our curbside collection is 8 loads a week, and then we receive substantial other loads from other sources.
Okay. Do we wish to, Deputy Mayor Lang?
Just one other point, when this landfill's full, all the loads are going to go that distance. So the longer we can keep it for the majority of our residents, and in our own budget, because it's going to be us that's going to be paying the extra trucking and the tipping fees when it goes all the way, when everything has to go there. So the longer we can keep it open, the better it is for the majority of the residents, I feel. So I'm kind of torn here. I see the point, but the demolition, it's a business decision they're making usually, unless it's a fire or something that's happened, but usually it's a business decision. So if they know the costs ahead of time.
So in that regard,
I'd just say it's just through you, Mr. Mayor, it's just we're making a cost inhibitor where, yes, and I agree with you, whenever the dump is full, everything's going to La Flèche or some other source unless we make an expansion and go through it. And I still stand by, I think we should be looking to expand it or see what it's going to cost us. We know we've got roughly 10 years left. Takes 10 years to get an expansion. We're 5 years late. We should have been doing this. It's not on Miss McDonald. It's on past council and councils even before that. It would have been easier 10 years ago, but we just kept saying we've got time left on the dump, and now this council's sitting here with, well, we don't really have that much time, so we got to plan ahead. I understand where you're coming from, but I do sympathize in the fact that most of those people that are making that investment in the municipality where they're demolishing a dwelling, whether it's on the number 2 or on the 4th line road or 3rd line road, they're looking to make an investment in the municipality, and they're 99% of the time increasing their property tax bill to the municipality. So it's kind of a give and trade. Roughly, I think that contractor told me general house demolishments were, in his experience, had been 10 to 12 loads, and it's substantial at the end of the day. But if it's, I don't know if we can even cap it even to say it's only for residential buildings, it's only for residential development or things like that, which would be plain and clear through a demolition permit. And they're being good actors. We're not rewarding bad actors. I still stand by. I cut the grass on the County Road 18. You can watch the whatever days that our municipal dump is open. There is a truck with a Quebec plate that comes by my place with a tipping container that he's picking up. It says "Rent me" on it or "Loue moi." He's coming from Quebec where he's making money, and he's dumping it in our municipality because there's nowhere in Quebec for him to go. And that's wrong, and we should not allow that. But I think local residents that are making an investment here, building a new house or a cottage, etc., if we can provide that, I think it would be a valued service. But that's my opinion.
Councillor Bougie?
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, I 100% agree with Councillor McDowell on the fact that I don't want to see any outside garbage come into our dump at all. So that needs to stop. And I'm kind of on the same page as Deputy Mayor Lang in the fact that it's going to fill up quicker if we allow that to happen. I know it's local, but I mean, they are a business at the end of the day, and then they'll just have to charge it. Because, I mean, my one load every second year, I mean, is minuscule compared to 20 loads. So I feel like, and I do also agree that it might be beneficial to look into expansion if possible of one of the dumps as well. Because once it's closed, it's closed. And we're all like Deputy Mayor Lang saying, we're all going to Moose Creek. So I think there's some opportunity there to look into that, but I want to expand it as long as possible.
Okay, well, it seems like 2 members of council are kind of swaying one way, so I guess I could call the vote, but maybe Ottawa will come with an incinerator. I think there was something in recent news. I had sent it onward to some staff, because if we can maybe get a support resolution, it's millions of dollars, I believe. But okay, so if we carry this one, it is as stands, and if we can either, because I guess I don't want to defer it if we don't have to. So I'll read the resolution. No, I don't have to read the resolution. I'll just call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as read? Okay, carried. This one's first and second reading only, moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Jaworski, and has to do with administrative monetary penalty systems, brought to you by Mr. Marion. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-70 be received, and that bylaw 2025-30 being a bylaw to establish an administrative monetary penalty system in the Township of South Glengarry be read a second time in open council this 23rd day of June 2025. Mr. Marion. Right, Mario.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So tonight we're going to speak about administrative monetary penalty system. All right, if we can go to the next slide. So what is AMPS? So AMPS is an administrative monetary penalty system. It's a method imposed by a municipality to deter violations of municipal bylaws. It creates an efficient and effective way to gain compliance, and it helps resolve minor bylaw infractions. AMPS has been around for 15 years, and it's administered through the Municipal Act. It's not only being used by municipalities, but it's also being used by provincial and federal agencies. And you'll see here on the slide that these are the cities, municipalities, and townships that currently use the system. Locally in SDNG, we have North Dundas and North Glengarry, and as well as the city of Cornwall uses this program. So why do we want to use AMPS? Residents can resolve minor bylaw matters in a more convenient, approachable, and less intimidating manner. The township can resolve minor bylaw infractions in a more less intimidating manner, that instead of going to provincial court, it's be internally through the township. It reduces costs associated with court proceedings, and it encourages compliance. So we're seeing more municipalities moving towards the AMP system due to the congestion of provincial courts. At times, a person can wait months or even perhaps up to a year just to get a court date to hear their case. Through this, through the AMPS, it'll be much quicker to hear their case at the township level. So what is a penalty notice? Penalty notice is the same as a ticket, except it requires a payment of a penalty instead of a fine issued for minor bylaw infractions. The township can still proceed under the Provincial Offences Act for more serious matters, and the penalty notices issued under AMPS do not cost more than the traditional fines. So this is the process of how AMPS would work. So if an individual gets a penalty notice, they have two options. They can pay that penalty once they receive it, or they can request a review through a screening officer within 15 days of receiving the penalty notice. That individual would have their case reviewed by a screening officer, and the screening officer would then make a decision. If the individual is not satisfied by that decision the screening officer makes, then they can request a review to go see a hearing officer within 30 days of the decision being made by the screening officer. At that point, when a hearing is made with the individual, the decision by the hearing officer would be final. So the review process, when it's up to review for a penalty notice, the screening officer or the hearing officer can either affirm, amend, or rescind the penalty. And also the officer, screening officer or hearing officer may also provide additional time to pay the penalty. And payments can be made online, by mail, or in person. So I'd like to conclude by saying that our enforcement model is not changing. We're still seeking compliance through education and informing residents and visitors of our municipal bylaws. This is just a different tool to use so we can use it at the township level than always having to go to provincial court in the case it may be to go that way.
Councillor Bougie.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Marion, for the presentation. One question in regards to fines. Now you had the scale with payment and payment type. And now if there's just a refusal of payment, is there a mechanism to put it on the tax bill? If that is that an option?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the case. So if the penalty is unpaid, then you can add it to the municipal tax roll.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Thank you very much for bringing this, Mr. Mario. Question also in terms of things not changing. Again, like we work on a complaint basis for enforcement. I assume there's no change from that perspective either. And I suppose then how do we make sure that, because I'd say it's often enough where a lot of like bylaw complaints come down to issues between neighbors. How do we make sure we don't have neighbors trying to like abuse a system like this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the enforcement would not change. It's still going to be on a complaint basis. From when it comes to neighbor disputes, and those would come to the officer's discretion if he or she would want to lay a penalty down. it's up to the officer's discretion. It wouldn't actually be up to the neighbors or the complainants or the appellant.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just also, I guess, I've had conversations, I guess, with some of the other municipalities in the counties that have adopted this, and they do speak quite highly of it. And I guess, would you offhand, Mr. Mario, have maybe an example of how much time you would spend with provincial court as of now? I know it's probably not that often where you have to go and challenge this, challenge this in Cornwall, but it is staff time. It is the taxpayers' dollar that's funding that. And at the end of the day, if we can do this in-house, essentially, for the few cases, I think there would be a staff savings at the end of the day, and maybe a little more of a, I guess, local home feel to it, that it's you're not going to stand before a judge over something with a dog or a sump pump or something like that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. What I've noticed from other municipalities who currently have this program in place, they're finding that it is a big cost savings by not having to go to provincial court and actually sitting in the courtroom and waiting for your turn to go up there through the docket. And they're finding if they do happen to lay a penalty down, they're finding that their disputes are within 45 days of issuing a penalty, either going through screening, hearing, or the individual paying that penalty.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add to that as well. Internally within our department, we do a lot of discussions about when we want to go to provincial offences court. And I feel that council over the years has been very clear that we don't always want to be in court. We want to work with people. We want to find resolutions. There are some times, though, where you just can't get the resolution. And then we talk about, okay, the time and effort and money to go to court, the legal costs. The provincial offences system is very bogged down, in my opinion. You don't have timely court dates. So by putting an AMPS process in place, or an AMPS bylaw in place, you could have lesser penalties as well as more timely compliance, as Pat just indicated. And it saves a lot of, it's a lot of paperwork to prepare a Part 3 summons to get before provincial offences court. It's a lot of time. So you really want to pick and choose when we're doing that. I feel like we are very careful when we make those decisions. We're not in court very often, but I can assure you that there's many properties where we don't have compliance because we've chosen not to go the court route because of the time and effort. And sometimes when you go before provincial offenses, if it's the individual's first offense, oftentimes their fine would be $500, where our cost would be far more than that. And, we have situations where if there's been a fine laid by provincial offenses or by the Justice of the Peace, then the individual can work with the court systems to come up with a payment plan where we're not getting the money in the long run anyway, because they do work with the people in the payment plan. So this would really help us gain compliance. And I think we do a good job. I think our bylaw officer does a great job with the staff, with the appellants, and or I shouldn't say the appellants, sorry, I'm struggling with my words, with people who complain, because we don't get a lot of complaints. Like we do make our effort to work with them. And if so, I would expect we'd hear more from council or more from members of the community, but this would really help us gain more compliance.
It has been a long evening, but that's okay. That's okay. Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm okay with proceeding with this. My concern maybe is what's in the appendices, and it seems like it's extreme to me. I want to be nice to my neighbors because I was trying to figure out there's 70 different things I could be fined for with my dog, and I think I could have got about $2,000 in fines today alone if I was to be complained on, like he's got to be on a leash all the time, and so I just think we got to go through that and make sure it looks like this is written for the city of Ottawa, the fines and all the different things you have to to provide, and how often you have to clean up the dog shit, and this kind of stuff. It's just, I think we want to have a careful look at that, and is that where we want to be as far as how many fines we're going to be putting out there. And it's easy to say we only act on complaints, but there are a lot of neighbors who if they realized, would have a field day with us, you know, complaining about people. And I'm just not sure that's the way we are here.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, you'll see that the staff report before you is asking council to read this bylaw for first and second reading. We are asking for feedback. I think that's excellent feedback. It's up to you and how you want this bylaw to look, how you want us to enforce it. If you're concerned with the values, you know, we could start at lower values and it could be amended later on if council's unhappy with those values or vice versa. But for this evening, we do request that you do provide us that feedback, and then Pat and I can work on it and make the amendments to the bylaw accordingly before we bring it back for final reading. You'll notice in the staff report that we'd be looking at implementing this on January 1st, so that affords time for the work to be done to select the hearing officer, select the screening officer, prepare those applicable bylaws, and that can be done between now and then and be ready for January. So we do have time. I did put a date in the staff report where we're looking for your opinion. I simply put a date in because sometimes we work better when we have a date, but we also will work with council to make sure that a bylaw is before you that you're willing to accept.
No, I think that's a fair point, because I probably feel similar to Deputy Mayor Lang. It's just like, how does it feel? Because like we shape the community, and these things reflect it. We had that conversation with the fire, the comprehensive fee bylaw. We had that same feeling. So it's not something that's just specific to this item. It's just, you know, that. Just because I think I have like a memory of Mr. Poupar, former. Did he also advocated for this? Is this the one where you have the access to the Ontario database as well? Then you need a certain door, you have to lock the server down now, and then there's some infrastructure costs that might go involved in like having that server. So I'd be curious as to the next rendition, having that a little bit more vetted, because like maybe it's $5,000, maybe it's $20,000 of repairs to the building and cost of stuff. So I'd like to see a range or something on that in the third and final reading.
So thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor, and it doesn't completely apply to this situation. I'll explain to you why. What you are recalling is several years ago, South Glengarry had put a parking bylaw in place. In order to enforce that parking bylaw, there was an investment that had to be made to purchase, I'm not exactly sure what you call it, the Ministry of Transportation. ARIS, thank you. And the reason for purchasing that is because that gives you access to individuals' driver's license, so you can actually issue a parking ticket. In this particular case, we don't have a parking bylaw, so we're not going to incur those costs. Also, by purchasing that system with the Ministry of Transportation, at that time, our office was easily accessible by the community or by the public in areas where our employees worked, where our computers were kept, where our servers are. That completely has changed. In the draft bylaw, you're going to notice that there's reference for parking, but because we don't have a current parking bylaw, we will not be in that situation where we have to incur those costs like you're recalling. If council chooses to establish a parking bylaw someday, then that's a discussion we would have to have with council.
Okay, no, the situation's changed, so opinions can change too. All right, so then with that, any further questions from council? Okay, so this is the first and second time, and then I get back to administration if you have any questions or comments afterwards. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Moving to zoning bylaw amendment 0325, McDonald. Ms. Haley. Moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-71 be received, and that bylaw 2025-31 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3809 to rezone the lot legally described as part of lot 38 concession 1 north of the Raisin River in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in the township of South Glengarry, county of Glengarry, located at 19091 County Road 18, pin 6711800275, from rural RU to rural exception 22, RU 22, to permit a workshop to be located 50 meters, to be located 50 meters setback from the front property line to accommodate a machining and fabrication business. In addition to permitting uses in the rural zone, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 23rd day of June 2025, and that all other applicable provisions of zoning bylaw 3809 as amended shall continue to apply. Ms. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you mentioned, you identified the location of this property. So this property is located outside of the rural settlement area of Martintown on the north side of County Road 18. The property is approximately 60.6 acres in size, and we're looking to rezone approximately 2.5 acres of the southwest corner of the subject property. On May 8th, the township accepted the zoning bylaw amendment and started the public process. You're going to see in our staff report that we provide a policy summary where we speak to the provincial planning statement and the United Counties official plan. And we also looked at the ministry, or MECPs, I still call it Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, D-Series Environmental Land Use Planning Guidelines to ensure that when we're making a recommendation to council, that we're considering all applicable policies at the provincial and the local level. You're going to see in the staff report that the proposed use does conform to the provincial planning statement as well as the official plan. I'm not going to get into details of the D-Series guidelines, but you'll see in section 12 of the report that a class 2 industrial use should be 70 meters away from a sensitive land use. And with the development proposed at a 50-meter setback that's incorporated into the bylaw, as well as the county road allowance being 24 meters, they exceed that 70-meter setback. You may recall at our public meeting on June 9th that we had 13 members of the public, including the property owner, in attendance and spoke about this amendment. In the report, I summarized the public comments, and I tried to do the best we could to address the public comments. The United Counties of SD&G Transportation Department is supportive of the access in this location. As I mentioned, they can meet the setbacks in the D-Series guidelines, and I feel that this is an acceptable location for this type of use. And in the report too, I include a variety of uses that could be included on this property because it is a rural property in the rural designation, and different various farming activities can occur on this property as well. So you'll see that staff is recommending this application to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from around the table? All right. Seeing as there was some opposition, I would like to just share my opinion just because I think it's fair to be public and transparent. Would be whenever I reflected on this, I kind of feel like there are quite a few farm outfits that would have some fabrication kind of involved in that. And then therefore, I thought I would be in favor of the proposal because it kind of matches with part of a farm, like, because there would be machine fabrication, maybe not on that extent, but it kind of matches to me with what agriculture is. Just in case somebody wants to hold me to account in 2026, Councillor Jaworski.
Since you opened the door, Mayor McDonald, I'm also getting tired. No, I'll admit I'm slightly tired, which is maybe why I was hesitating. But I did also want to speak in favor of this because I think on balance, I think it is the right decision, and I do agree that a county road is the appropriate type of infrastructure to have a facility like this. I know folks had concerns about the scale of it in terms of the square footage. It's not much larger than some of the homes actually that are in proximity. Some homes are actually quite large as well in that area. So, and I know folks had concerns about water as well. My understanding of the process is that they'll be using are not particularly water intensive, and that actually in their first design they weren't going to be even having drilling a well, but it's required for them to have a well because they're required to have a bathroom, because when you build a structure like this, you're required to have that. And the last comment, I know, and this is just in terms of, when we have public meetings and what folks might say regarding an applicant, there were comments made about dumping on the property and what's allowed and not allowed. And obviously, we want to ensure that, folks who are applying, for situations like this, we don't want to be encouraging bad behavior. So it was something that I did look into further to understand what was the history around those comments. And while it seems that some of the residents there have concerns that there was something that was illegal happening, my understanding with speaking with folks who are familiar with the file, including at the Ministry of Environment, is that, I mean, the reason there was never any order or material was never removed is because what was being done there is allowed. It's allowed to reuse, to use demolition material of a certain kind in like road building and landscaping and that sort of thing. So one thing I would say, I know we can't do this under our regulations as they are, but I would recommend strongly to the person building the building that they do some sort of fence or something like that to separate their operation. But again, that's purely a personal opinion. I understand that we don't have in this kind of zoning any control over that sort of thing.
Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, since you opened the door as well, I'll take the opportunity. I'll speak in support of it as well. I don't believe it's going to be a major nuisance to the adjacent property owners, and I think the addition to the building is probably going to be quite aesthetically pleasing. I think at the end of the day, no business goes in and wants to build an ugly building there. That's going to be their home base and their kind of jewel for their operation. I would assume they're going to keep it quite clean and aesthetically pleasing. And at the end of the day, I reflected on this when I was Saturday morning rolling out of my laneway at the farm with a chemical sprayer for going out to spray fields at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning. They aren't going to be doing that, but a farm operation could build a much larger shop and would build a much larger shop on a property like that, and would be a lot more I guess harassing, or would cause a lot more maybe inconvenience to those looking to enjoy their homes in their backyards. So I don't believe that once this is built and operating, it's going to be bothering too many people. I think actually a farm shop and farmyard would be a lot more detrimental to people's way of life, just with the odd hours we tend to work. So I'll speak in favor of it.
All right, seeing no other comments, all those in favor? Carried. Moving to zoning bylaw amendment 0425, Doncos. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-72 be received and that the council deny bylaw 2025-32 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3809 to rezone the lot legally described as part of lot 97, registered plan 107 being Part 1 on reference plan 14R5461 in the geographic township of Schlottenburg, now in the township of South Glengarry, county of Glengarry, pin 6712000133, from natural hazard NZ to natural hazard exemption 1, NZ1, to permit a recreational vehicle RV, which will be used as a seasonal dwelling on a vacant lot in addition to the permitted uses in the natural hazard zone. Ms. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report was not a really easy report to write, and a lot of policies had to be reviewed. You'll see in the staff report that we are recommending this application to be denied. In my opinion, it does not conform to the provincial planning statement. It doesn't conform to the official plan, and the reason for that is because this property is located in a hazard zone. It is subject to flooding. We all know that that area of McGilvery Road can flood, or various areas of McGilvery Road can flood. And our policies are very clear that we do not want any type of development in a flood hazard or a floodplain. I'm not going to go through every detail in the report, but you'll see various sections of where and why it does not conform to the applicable policies. I do want to point out that this application was also circulated to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority because of the proximity to the Raisin River. And you'll see that the RCA is recommending that it be denied as well. And their reason is that it's located in a natural hazard area. They provided very detailed information in regards to the flood inundation on the property and how easily it can flood in the 1 and 2 year events as well as in the 1 and 100 year events. And it's in contrary to the Conservation Authority Act as well. We had done some additional research on this property, and we have some concerns that, you know, if we allowed this type of use, then there could be expectations for additional services to be provided, such as waste management and, you know, civic addressing, and how the waste is going to be dealt with from the camping trailer. Like, not, these owners could be very responsible owners, but not everyone is responsible with their waste. And so when we make these decisions, we make it for the basis of the property, not the particular owner of the day. We also worked with our chief building official, and he confirmed that he was not able to issue a septic system in this location if and when a septic system were to be applied for, and the RSCA would not support a septic system for that as well. You'll notice in the report that we included some information from MPAC. So MPAC does not assess recreational vehicles or any associated accessory uses with a recreational vehicle because it's not a permitted structure. So we could end up with a parcel of property that's being used that expects services that we're not gaining any additional taxes for. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those questions, but we are recommending this application to be denied. Thank you.
We'll go to Deputy Mayor Lang and then Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thanks for the report. We know kind of ahead of time that you were going to have to recommend it be denied, and the Raisin region as well. And that's what staff's job is to do. But luckily, there's council that is over top of that gets to kind of look at them individually and say whether they, you know, they are responsible and whether we think it's serious enough. And I personally am perfectly fine with it. I'd like to see it move ahead. I've seen the property numerous times. It's way better shape than it ever used to be. They've got a camper on it. The camper's on wheels. If it was to flood, it's going to be their responsibility, not ours. Nothing to do with any comeback on us. And I think it's quite easy to move it out of there. If you wanted to move it out for the week and a half or so in the spring when it typically does flood, you know, it's only in the spring when the Raisin does what it normally does in floods. So I'm perfectly fine with allowing them to have it there. And I think that's. Staff has done what they need to do, but I think that's where we get to come in. And if we were only going to just always follow staff, we wouldn't really need council.
Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Personally, I'm going to agree with the Deputy Mayor as well. I feel that it's probably an improvement as to what I've seen the property be used as in the past, and I think I'd be much more in favor of driving by it, seeing somebody enjoying it, and enjoying being outside as opposed to even just seeing it being used as a hayfield. As for civic addressing, I would encourage us to, if there is a way to put a civic address on that property, just in the event that there is an issue, we do it with farm parcels. And I would like to think that if somebody came to us and said they were using this as a 4-acre hayfield, and I know I've worked in fields smaller than 4 acres for other farmers around, that if they wanted that or needed that, a civic number there, whether it was for their, the crop company coming in or a custom worker coming in looking for the address, we would be happy to do it, let alone just for safety purposes. If something were to happen on that, they're not trying to describe it to the to the dispatcher, first responders. So if there's a workaround, I understand that sometimes we do have those, you know, we are kind of limited in what we can do, but if we can, as far as a civic address, I'd like to see one added to it. But personally, I do appreciate staff's recommendation, and I can imagine it's not easy to make this recommendation when, you know, Ms. Haley, I think, goes above and beyond for the public in trying to find the way to yes, and sometimes there is no way to yes on some properties, and that's where council plays a role. So my thoughts anyways on this.
Did you have something, Ms. Haley?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this amendment is approved and if the applicant does apply for a civic address, we would not deny them a civic address. The bylaw would allow us to issue the address. They would just pay the applicable fee, which I believe is $108.
Okay. Councillor Bougie and then Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. Ms. Haley, you mentioned a couple times about waste, and I understand they wouldn't be able to apply for a septic system, and it would be not denied because they're in the floodplain zone. But what is their current method? Is it an external tank? I mean, it is mobile too, so I guess they can pull out when they need to. for dumping if that's a concern, but I guess that was my first question. And then, I mean, I feel like we've had one of these in the past, but it was neighboring another building. I mean, there are really no neighbors around. It is their property. It seems like they're maintaining it well. So, I mean, I don't really have any issues with this one, but for the waste part, I was wondering if you had the answer for that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is my understanding that the waste is collected in a container and removed appropriately. And I have no reason not to believe that it's not being handled that way. We've certainly not received any complaints, and that is my understanding.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's one of those ones where there's several layers of rules around this one, and sometimes when you step back, you're sort of like, you know, sometimes rules are not necessarily written for, I think this is kind of like a situation that's not really envisaged, and honestly, like if we at some point, like then it becomes a property that you own it and you can't do anything with it. Like you cannot enjoy it. You can go, I guess, bring out a lawn chair and sit there for a bit. But I mean, at some point, it's sort of, you're really impeding people's opportunities, and it seems like a very small thing although it's, you know, not standard, it's not something that's particularly, it's not some huge production, it's still something fairly small. But you made a comment, Ms. Haley, regarding property taxes and how, what if folks come to start expecting certain services? And I guess I just wanted to follow up on that, because I would expect that that's always, like, if that question comes to staff, then like staff would say no. But I guess I just want to understand, is there something that we need to do to make sure that we don't have awkward or difficult conversations in the future about it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. I apologize if I wasn't clear. So what I was basically getting at is as you allow development or properties to be used, there could be an expectation of different municipal services to be provided, and we will not gain any additional taxes. So for example, if we had a building lot, that building lot of record, you pay taxes on a vacant lot. You apply for a building permit, your assessment increases, and it makes sense for your assessment to increase because you've put a structure there, but you're also paying for all the municipal services that are provided, whether it's, you know, policing, ambulance, right down to waste management. And so what I was getting at is that you could allow the property to be used, but you're never going to gain additional assessment because there's no ability to increase the assessment because a structure cannot be constructed. But again, that's council's decision. I was just making you aware of that.
All right, so it seems like council would like to defeat the motion as it's read. I understand the clerk has another motion in favor of it. So the motion as read is to defeat it, or is to deny it. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a comment on, and Ms. Haley, please correct me if I misspeak, but in the resolution, because you are voting, because we're not, sorry, we're all tired, eh? What I'm trying to say is we have to give a reason why. So you'll note when I read off the new resolution, I added some wording at the end with the help of Ms. Haley just to provide that reasoning, and that is for Planning Act purposes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can jump in if you want, Mr. Mayor. So
Thank you.
As the Deputy Mayor has indicated, this is council's decision. We have to make a recommendation, and not always is our recommendation agreed with. So in this particular case, I'm obligated under the Ontario Planning Act to issue what's called the Notice of Decision, and we have to explain the reason in that notice why council chose to approve it. And so that's why it would be important for you to have a resolution that would explain your reasoning, so then that I can report that accordingly and include that in the decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, then, so this was to deny it, so if you wish to, I think you're looking to defeat it, yeah. Yeah. Yes, so all those in favor? All those opposed? Defeated. And we'll just wait for the next resolution. Are you're prepared to read it?
Yes, I will. Mr. Mayor, I did have one printed, but I played with it a little bit, so I'm just going to read it if that's okay with you. And if you could just call for mover and seconder after it's read, I'll maybe read it first to make sure council's happy with it, and then if you could just call for a mover and seconder, and then proceed with the vote. So, be it resolved that staff report 2025-72 be received and that bylaw 2025-32, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 38-09 to rezone the property legally described as part of lot 97, registered plan 107, being part 1 on reference plan 14R5461 in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in the township of South Glengarry, county of Glengarry, pin 6712-00133, from natural hazard to natural hazard exception 1 to permit a recreational vehicle which will be used as a seasonal dwelling on a vacant lot in addition to the permitted uses in the natural hazard zone be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 23rd day of June 2025. And furthermore, that the council of the Township of South Glengarry acknowledges that the requested zoning bylaw amendment is not consistent with the PPS 2024 or United Counties of SDG official plan. However, the requested amendment will not negatively impact the abutting property owners and will present minimal risk to the requested use.
That sounds fine by council. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. All those in favor? Carried. Consent agenda. There were no items pulled, so moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Be it resolved that council accepts the items listed on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Carried. Because I skip it, I get reminders now. Boards and committees. I believe that Deputy Mayor Lang, as warden, would like to report about the SDG County Councils, and I don't think there was anything further. If there is, just speak up after him. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to keep it short because we've been in these chairs pretty close to 4 hours now. We adopted our 2024 financial statements from MNP. No problems. Everything looked good. Let's see. There was a setback motion, but it was pretty straightforward. Tenders and quotations. The culvert lining tender, we collaborated with Cornwall for a joint tender. 400 and almost 500,000, 496,500 and change for the counties, and 169 and change for the city of Cornwall. Nice to see us working with the city of Cornwall for things, and it was a little higher than what we had kind of expected for the culvert lining, but it saves a pile of money as tearing up asphalt and having to redo those roads. Insurance for the counties, 264,285, up 12%, and that's $28,000, 900 that we went up, but kind of expected. We had not gone up much, I think, the year before, and we were expecting that there was going to be an increase there. So I don't think there was too much else that was pressing. Thanks.
Thank you. So we will move to a closed session to end the evening, and then we'll come out without reporting. So to go into closed session, moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor McDonnell, be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry appoint Kimberly Castleman as acting clerk for the closed session portion of the regular meeting of June 23rd, 2025. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Council convened a closed session at 9:49 p.m. to discuss the following items under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act SO 2001. Pursuant to Section 2039 or 239 2B of the Municipal Act, personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, specifically employee matter. All those in favor? Carried. All right, welcome back. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that council rise and reconvene into open session at 10:25 p.m. without reporting. All those in favor? Carried. Confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Be resolved that bylaw 2025-33, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by resolution, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 23rd day of June 2025. All those in favor? Carried. Adjournment, moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry adjourn to the call of the Chair at 10:26 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Have a good evening, everyone.